Chapter 1686. Many thanks to Dream Demon and Thunder for their tips. Mana that was as thick as a tidal wave spread out in all directions. It was like a tidal wave that instantly filled every corner of this space. Look at the latest. The headmaster stood in the middle of the sea of magic. His tall and sturdy, dark body was emitting a steady stream of magic that made people's expressions change. This kind of magical power was already stronger than any puppeteer or magician. Amidst this magical power, the Solomon's key floating above the dean's palm shone brightly. It was as if a pillar of light had risen and enveloped the dean. Soon after, a dreamlike scene that made it hard for people to tell if it was real or not quietly appeared in this sea of mana. Behind the dean, who was enveloped in a pillar of light, a dazzling staircase that seemed to be made of pearls slowly appeared. The staircase had a beautiful shape and looked like it was made of pearls. With the pillar of light enveloping the principal as the source, the staircase continued to extend upwards, and a pure white wall appeared along with the staircase. On the stairs, a red carpet was also laid out. In the pure white hall that looked like a palace, it gradually extended to a place higher than the ceiling. Not long after, the staircase extended to the end and connected with a platform that appeared out of thin air. At the top of the stairs, on a platform that appeared out of thin air, a luxurious throne decorated with gold and silver stood in the middle of the platform. Wu Yin, Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Agarola, Canon, and the others can clearly see what's going on. On the throne, there was a beautiful girl sitting upright, full breasts. Her skin was fair, and her waist was shockingly slender. Her beautiful face was absolutely neat, and a pair of eyes that seemed to despise everything was dotted on it. Her body was wrapped in a gorgeous dress that seemed to be made of thin white silk, and her hands and feet were decorated with countless golden rings. Ikaros, Astria, Agarola, and Canon stared at the beautiful girl sitting on the throne at the top of the stairs and mumbled to each other. Queen, Queen, no. Wu Yin and Natsuki's expression turned serious. That's the automaton. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, yes. The queen sitting on the throne on the platform at the top of the stairs was an automaton. It was stored in the Key of Solomon and was sent to this era from the future. It might be widely known. It was an automaton T that had countless puzzles. Wu Yin and Natsuki could sense something from this automaton that other automatons don't have. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, breath. Moreover, it was a very powerful aura. It proves that the automaton sitting on the throne at the top of the staircase isn't something to be trifled with. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, maybe. This was the level of the automaton. It was one of the Snowflake Moon, which had the highest level of automaton T at the moment. Even more advanced than the Yay of the Moondal. Under the watchful eyes of everyone present, the queen, who was sitting on the throne at the top of the stairs, slowly stood up, as if she was a king on an inspection tour. He walked down the stairs leisurely. As the automaton walked, every step it stepped on would turn into golden particles and dissipate when it lifted its foot. When the automaton descended to a certain distance, the dean retreated to the side and bowed respectfully like a loyal subject, welcoming the king he swore allegiance to. Welcome, Your Excellency, Queen Ishtar. The queen named Ishtar walked to the ground, and the stairs, palace, platform, and throne behind her disappeared like a mirage in an instant. It wasn't until she reached the ground that Ishtar began to look at everything in her field of vision. She glanced at the dean who bowed to her. Long time no see yet. How long has it been since you last summoned me? Yes, it has indeed been a long time. The dean said respectfully, as if he was talking to a friend or someone he swore loyalty to. There's nothing I can do about it. There aren't many existences in this world who can make me summon Queen Ishtar for help. That's right. There aren't many existences in this world who can make me summon Queen Ishtar. Indeed, Ishtar nodded in satisfaction. He seemed to be enjoying the compliment very much and asked, "You're right. Then did you summon me this time because an opponent strong enough for me to make a move has appeared?" Without waiting for the dean's reply, Ishtar raised her eyes and looked ahead. She frowned when she saw Wu Yin and the others. "Isn't this still a ghost?" Hearing Ishtar's disdainful words, Wu Yan's eyes turned cold. Hum! Along with the sound of the air shaking, a violent mana outage erupted from Wu Yan's body. It turned into a storm that swept across the land and kicked up a large amount of sand. The ground cracked under the weight of the mana outage. Pieces of gravel burst out from the ground like broken glass. Under the attack of the mana outage, the gravel turned into deadly bullets and shot out in all directions. Bam! 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 The rubble that had turned into bullets raged on. Everywhere it passed, a hole was blown out in the wall that blocked the way. The trees were directly cut open and exploded at the waist, smashing heavily on the ground. Seeing this, both the dean and Ishtar narrowed their eyes in shock. This level of magical power is comparable to that of a demon god. Ishtar finally took Wu Yin seriously. "Looks like I've made the mistake of underestimating the enemy that I shouldn't have. It's not just Her Highness." The dean smiled bitterly. "Originally, I thought that I had already overestimated him, but in the end, he gave me another surprise. I also underestimated him. Let me acknowledge you for now," Ishtar said, obviously directed at Wu Yin. Ishtar then stretched out his fair arm gracefully. "You are qualified to make me use the army that I am so proud of." "Army?" Wu Yin and the other girls didn't know what's going on. The dean respectfully reached out his hand and held Ishtar's outstretched hand. His magical power surged from his overlapping hands and was injected into Ishtar's body. With the replenishment of his magic, Ishtar looked forward in a dignified and graceful manner. Then he raised his free hand slightly in front of him. Hum! The next moment, from Ishtar's outstretched hand, a black shadow swept out like overflowing water, or like a mist that appeared out of thin air. Wu Yin, Natsuki, and Ikaros were shocked when they saw the black shadow bursting out of Ishtar's hand. Astria, Agurora, and Shane's expression changed. They almost screamed out loud. This was because the front end of the shadow that burst forth from Ishtar's hand was decorated with the face of a man in agony, as if something had been carved into it. It was just like a vengeful spirit in the legends. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP. The vengeful spirit seemed to be making some kind of hissing sound. Its face was filled with pain, and it opened and closed its mouth ferociously. Shortly after, the vengeful spirits rushed out of Ishtar's hand at an astonishing speed. They looked like meteors with black mist as they swarmed towards Wu Yin. Looking at the swarm of vengeful spirits, whether it was Wu Yin or the girls, they all felt a sense of danger. Their intuition told them that these things that made them uncomfortable must not be touched. Even though they didn't know what the consequences would be, they knew that touching them would definitely not feel good. Wu Yin was the first one to trust his intuition. He poured all of his mana into Ikaros' body. Ikaros' eyes quickly turned crimson red, and an illusory frame appeared in front of her. A cold voice sounded, and in the next second, a translucent crystal barrier appeared out of thin air and protected Wu Yin and the girls behind it. Asterisk boom. Asterisk, asterisk boom. Asterisk almost at the same time, the vengeful spirits that were swarming at an astonishing speed suddenly crashed into the absolute defense circle, stirring up a storm of impact and black fog. Chapter 1687. Boom! Amidst the sound of the collision, the group of wraiths that rushed over violently undulated like waves crashing on a reef. Black mist splashed up and instantly covered the surface of the Aegis. Aegis, 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 Aegis. Chi-chi. Not long after, the surface of the Aegis that was touched by the group of wraiths actually collapsed like glue that was being burned. Seeing this scene, Wu Yin and a group of young girls trembled and stood up in surprise. Ikaros' Aegis was corroded? No, it wasn't corroded. Instead, it was being corroded and devoured by something. However, other than corrosion, there was no other way to describe the signs before him. Icaros Aegis was like a piece of rotten meat. It loosely collapsed and melted down before being swallowed by the wraiths. This was not something that could be done easily. It's not that easy to take down Icaros Aegis. Even with her power restricted, Icaros Aegis could easily block a nuclear bomb. At least, ever since she came to this world, Icaros Aegis had never been broken through properly. The reason why Charlotte was able to break through Icaros Aegis was because it contained the universal truth. In theory, the demonic sword that could destroy all matter had wiped out the existence of the Aegis, but did not count as destroying the Aegis. The only reason Magnus was able to break Icaros Aegis was because the Jade Worm has a magic circuit that absorbs all the mana needed to support the Aegis, causing the Aegis to disappear. Both times, the two people who broke through Icaros Aegis didn't rely on attacks that exceeded the defensive power of the Aegis to break through the Aegis. And now, Ishtar's wraiths are using the same method to corrode Icaros Aegis. That's why the wraiths, they definitely didn't just have the ability to corrode. If they only had the ability to corrode, there's no way they could melt the Aegis in less than 2 seconds. Therefore, it was good for Astrea to witness the might of the wraiths. Agrora, she couldn't stop her face from trembling. Wu Yin, Natsuki, and Icaros also showed a troubled expression. Only Canon looked at the wraiths like there was something she hated. For the first time, she showed a look of disgust. However, Canon wasn't afraid of the wraiths at all. That's only natural. Canon's power of purification is the bane of all evil. As long as Canon uses her hidden power of purification, these wraiths will be wiped out in an instant. Natsuki seemed to have thought of this too. She turned to Wu Yin for Wu Yan's opinion. Wu Yin hesitated for a bit before he lowered his voice and told Natsuki, "Let's observe the situation first." Natsuki nodded in agreement. Bang! At the same time, Icaros Aegis finally melted to the point where it couldn't hold on any longer. It shattered with a crisp sound. However, before that, Natsuki had also used spatial teleportation magic to teleport all of them away. Bang! The next moment, the creepy, vengeful spirits flooded the area where Wu Yin and Co. were standing like a putrid swamp. TSK, TSK. In an instant, the ground was corroded, forming a large hole with a diameter of about 5 meters. There was even a trace of black fog coming out of the hole, causing the sand and dust that came into contact with it to be extinguished in the air. Yoa! With Natsuki's teleportation, the group appeared in an empty space not far away. The moment they appeared, Astrea shrieked and jumped up as if she was bitten. Before Natsuki used her spatial magic, a wraith brushed past Astrea's pure white wings. Astrea's pure white wings started to burn as if they were being burned by an invisible fire. The feathers on them started to rot and turn into ashes that floated down to the ground. Not only that, the corrosion spread to Astrea's wings at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Master! Master!" Astrea screamed in panic. Wu Yin placed his hand on Canon's shoulder and channeled his mana into her body. "Canon!" "Yes." Canon raised her hand. With a buzzing sound, a holy light shone from her hand and enveloped Astrea's corroding wings. Under the effect of the holy light, the corrosive effect on Astrea's wings gradually slowed down until it disappeared completely. Astrea's burnt wings returned to their original state in the blink of an eye, as if nothing happened. Ishtar was shocked when he saw the damage caused by his vengeful spirits vanish just like that. The dean pondered for a moment and nodded. "I almost forgot that the silver-haired automaton has excellent healing magic." "Healing?" Ishtar narrowed his eyes and sneered. "Then I shall devour all of you in an instant." Ishtar raised his hand again, and a horde of grudgeful wraiths rushed out of his palm. The grudgeful wraiths pounced on Wu Yin and Co. with a dark mist and a hideous expression on their faces. Wu Yin closed his eyes when he saw the horde of wraiths rushing towards him. Taking a deep breath, Wu Yin slowly revealed his wine-red eyes. His eyes flashed with a ferocious glint. A violent whirlwind of mana burst out from his body. Wu Yin leaped and stood in front of the girls. This time, even Ishtar himself was stunned. Not to mention Ishtar, even the dean was stunned on the spot. Not only did the other party not use the defensive barrier to block the attack, but he actually took the initiative to step forward. Could it be that he wanted to end his own life? Wu Yin immediately informed the dean and Ishtar that he was trying to end his own life. Whoosh! With a whistling sound, the mana that rushed out of Wu Yan's body turned into a substantial airflow that hovered in the air. Then, the airflow turned into a black mist. As if it had a mind of its own, it spun wildly and protected Wu Yan's group like a protective barrier. Boom! The wraiths crashed into the black mist of mana. Black sparks erupted from the mist like volcanic ash. However, a scene that surprised both the dean and Ishtar appeared. Boom! The group of vengeful spirits that had hit the pitch-black mist of mana were all bounced away by the rotating mist of mana. Now, Wu Yin yelled from within the mist of mana. Ikaros! Ikaros spread her arms, and the Aegis, absolute defense circle, rippled. But this time, the Aegis, absolute defense circle, didn't appear around Wu Yan's group. Instead, it appeared around the dean and Ishtar like a cage, trapping them inside. At the same time, Natsuki raised the lace fan in her hand and waved it in the direction of the dean. On the surface of the Aegis, absolute defense circle, spatial ripples appeared one by one, and the chains of discipline lashed at the dean like whips. Oomph! Ishtar snorted. He raised his hand and was about to use his wraiths to corrode the chains of discipline. But at this moment, an icy white mist filled the air. Chapter 1688. Whoosh! Amidst the whistling sound, the freezing white mist permeated the interior of the Aegis and instantly filled the entire space of the Aegis. Instantly, the temperature inside the Aegis dropped at a terrifying speed. In just a few seconds, the temperature had dropped below 0 degrees Celsius. Originally, with Agrora's current strength, there was no way for the temperature to drop so quickly. However, Ikaros had created an absolutely sealed environment, allowing Agrora's cold air to spread rapidly, causing the temperature inside the Aegis to drop abnormally fast. Kacha! Before the president and Ishtar could react, the cold mist had filled the interior of the Aegis, causing a layer of ice to condense on the surface of the Aegis. In the blink of an eye, the ground was covered with hard ice. A layer of ice formed on Ishtar's hand that he extended towards the incoming lock of discipline. Even the dean himself and Ishtar's body were covered in a layer of ice. TSK. Ishtar's elegant and dignified posture was finally replaced by a trace of panic. The president knitted his brows tightly. Both of them hurriedly mobilized their magical power and used pure magical power to disperse the ice around them and expel the surrounding cold air. Whoosh! However, while the president and Ishtar were shaking off the ice shards on their bodies and dispelling the cold air around them, the lock of discipline whizzed through the interior of the Aegis and wrapped around the president and Ishtar's limbs. The president's frown deepened. A majestic magical power surged from the four limbs that were bound by the lock of discipline, attempting to shatter the lock of discipline on their bodies. However, the president soon discovered it. The magical power in his body could still be mobilized on its own. However, there was no way for it to escape from his body. The reason was simple. The surface of the lock of discipline that was glowing with a purple light was flowing with another type of magical power, isolating the magical power that was trying to escape from the president's body. Damn it! Ishtar also discovered this and was a little annoyed. What a pointless action. My army is created in my body. Even if I can't let the magical power out of my body, it doesn't matter. As soon as he finished speaking, Ishtar's palm turned into a ghastly wraith. Ugly, vengeful spirits were spat out one after another, their ferocious faces covering the lock of discipline that bound the principal and Ishtar. Under the effect of the vengeful spirit's corrosion, the purplish glow flowing on the surface of the lock of discipline, which was said to be forged by the gods, quickly dimmed. Even the lock of discipline itself was corroded and full of holes. I'm afraid, not long after the lock of discipline would be completely corroded. However, just as the wraiths were about to corrode the lock of discipline on the president and Ishtar, a strong sense of danger rose in their hearts. Following this sense of danger, the president and Ishtar shifted their attention to the front almost at the same time. It was on the Aegis absolute defense circle that had a layer of ice on its surface. Then, the president and Ishtar discovered it. On the Aegis absolute defense circle that stood around like a cage with a layer of ice on its surface, there was a hole in a place without them noticing. Their line of sight passed through the hole. Staring at the outside of the Aegis absolute defense circle, what the president and Ishtar saw was a figure. It was a pitch-black figure dressed in black clothes. A pair of wine-red eyes that were as calm as an ancient well was looking straight at them. The figure was outside the Aegis absolute defense circle. In his hand was a gorgeous black bow that looked like it was made of black crystal. He pulled the bowstring and condensed an arrow that looked like a meteor, aiming at the two figures. For the first time, the most powerful magician of the 19th century and the legendary automaton sent from the future to this era changed their expressions at the same time. Looking at the sudden change of expression on the president's and Ishtar's faces, Wu Yin, who was standing outside the Aegis absolute defense circle, had a flash of coldness in his wine-red eyes. Then, without hesitation, Wu Yin released the bowstring of the meteor shower in his hand. Whoosh! Like a meteor appearing in the night sky, the meteor shower arrow bloomed in the air with a long tail of light. It flashed and shot into the only exposed hole in the Aegis absolute defense circle, and burst into the Aegis absolute defense circle. When the meteor shower arrow shot into the Aegis absolute defense circle, the only exposed hole on the surface of the Aegis absolute defense circle quickly healed and was sealed again. Then, an intense and dazzling light flashed in the Aegis absolute defense circle. Bam! Inside the Aegis absolute defense circle, which was filled with white cold mist and chains that shuttled back and forth. The surface was covered with a layer of ice, and the ground inside was covered with hard ice. An earth-shattering explosion sounded like a clap of thunder in the vast sky above the Aegis absolute defense circle. A violent gust of wind carried with it a blazing heat, like a storm crazily attacking the Aegis absolute defense circle. Inside, the white cold mist was almost instantly dispersed, and the ground that was covered with hard ice cracked immediately. Cracks as thick as an arm spread out like a spiderweb. The cracks spread across the entire Aegis absolute defense circle. Even the ground outside the Aegis absolute defense circle started to crack inch by inch. The seemingly sturdy Aegis absolute defense circle also started to crack like glass in a short period of time. One can imagine that without the Aegis absolute defense circle, the meteor shower would have mercilessly destroyed everything around it. At that time, not far away, the Dean's mansion would not be able to escape the fate of being destroyed. Those guards who had been frozen into ice by Aurora would also not be able to escape death. Astrea asked nervously as she looked at the apocalyptic scene inside the Aegis absolute defense circle. Is it defeated? No one answered Astrea's question. It should be said that no one had the energy to answer Astrea's question. Wu Yin, Natsuki, Ikaros, Aurora, Cannon, and the others stared at the Aegis absolute defense circle that was gradually cracking. After an unknown amount of time, the heat wave inside the Aegis absolute defense circle slowly dissipated, revealing the situation inside. The two figures inside were also exposed to the air. A man and a woman stood in the middle of the cracked ground. Their clothes were slightly disheveled. It looked like they just ran around in the middle of the storm. However, there wasn't a single wound on the man and woman's bodies. That attack just now only brought a slight threat to them. It didn't do any damage at all. I knew it. Wu Yan's face darkened. It's not that simple. You should feel honored, little. Ishtar looked at Wu Yin coldly. In order to escape from the situation just now, I summoned my second army. Second army? Wu Yin and the rest of the girls were stunned. Could it be that Ishtar doesn't only have those vengeful spirits that can corrode his body? You keep on giving me surprises. To be able to force Queen Ishtar to summon her second army, your performance has truly surprised me. The dean looked at Wu Yin and sighed. Magnus is a genius who has broken the records of the Academy. He's the first in all of history. Although I've always said that you're a treasure like Magnus, I've never been willing to admit it in my heart. To think that there would be a second genius like Magnus. The dean let go of Ishtar's hand and retracted his mana. He looked at Wu Yin with a smile. I think we should have a chat. Chapter 1689. I think it's time for us to have a chat. Everyone had different reactions when they saw the dean retracting his mana and saying those words with a smile. Ishtar, who couldn't get a supply of magic power, couldn't fight even if he wanted to. His face was full of dissatisfaction, but he didn't object. Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, and Canon looked at each other in confusion. Natsuki's beautiful brows were tightly knitted together. Her beautiful eyes were filled with thoughts, as if she was trying to figure out the dean's intentions. Wu Yin narrowed his eyes and spoke. Your so-called chat. Don't tell me you're trying to tell me that you've long known that I was being used by someone else, and that's why you came to assassinate me? As soon as he said that, not only the dean, but all the girls, including Ishtar, were stunned. What is the meaning of this? The dean didn't expect Wu Yin to give such an answer to his question. A surprised expression appeared on his face, but the smile on his face disappeared. Anyone who was familiar with the dean would know that the dean would only react this way when a certain step of his plan was disrupted. Wu Yin messed up the dean's plan. However, Wu Yin didn't hold back at all. He showed a mocking smile to the dean who, from a certain aspect, controlled the treatment he would receive in this world. I say, Dean, don't tell me you think I don't know anything. His words were so confusing that the young ladies were even more confused. At the same time, the dean's expression also became more and more solemn. The dean's gaze sharpened as he stared at Wu Yin. Looks like I didn't just look down on your strength. Letting out a light sigh, the dean once again piled up a smile on his tanned face. You're right, Wu Yin. I already knew that you were being used by someone to kill me. What do you mean? This time, Natsuki, who was frowning, couldn't help but speak up. You said you knew we were being used by someone to kill you? Then why don't you find out who's behind this and treat us like criminals instead? Natsuki was right. If the dean already knew that Wu Yin and co. were being used by someone else to kill him, then that's even more reason for him to do so. He should have found a mastermind who wanted to take his life. Instead of not even saying a single word, he should have faced Wu Yin head-on, because that was meaningless, wasn't it? Even if the mastermind was subdued, the mastermind was still alive. The dean's life couldn't be guaranteed. Moreover, if he really knew the inside story, the dean wouldn't just stay silent and fight with a person who was being used. At the very least, he should tell Wu Yin that he knows the inside story and try to get information out of Wu Yin's mouth about the mastermind behind all of this. However, not only did the dean not do so, he only advised Wu Yin a bit before treating him like an actual assassin and engaging him in battle. It didn't make sense. Well, let's talk about one problem at a time. The dean was like an amiable old man. He squinted his eyes and showed a peaceful expression. First, Wu Yin, you should know who is the one who wants to take my life, right? The Kingsford family. Wu Yin glanced at the dean. To be precise, it's the Kingsford family and the Granville family who wants to help the Kingsford family, right? The Kingsford family and the Granville family used to be political enemies, but there's no such thing as eternal enemies in the eyes of the major powers. Now, the two families have formed an alliance because of some benefits. The dean sighed and shook his head. That's why the Granville family wants to help the Kingsford family. In order for the Kingsford family to return to the political arena, they plan to kill me who caused the Kingsford family's downfall and sentence Felix to death. But, Wu Yin, San, I wonder if you're aware of something like this as well? The headmaster asked in a probing manner. Actually, recently, the Kingsford family has sent a secret envoy to contact me in private. A secret messenger from the Kingsford family? It wasn't Wu Yin who was confused. It was Natsuki. However, Natsuki quickly thought of something and sneered. I see. They plan to use soft tactics to bribe you before they use hard tactics? If they can bribe me and let me fabricate some fake evidence to announce the fact that Felix was wrongly accused, wouldn't that solve the problem? The dean acknowledged Natsuki's words and shrugged his shoulders. The Granville family knows nothing about this. So, regardless of whether the assassination plan succeeds or fails, the Granville family can be blamed for it? Nayu spoke with disgust from the bottom of her heart. She then looked at the headmaster. Then, did you know that we were used to kill you because the Kingsford family bribed you? Did you learn the whole story from them? Exactly. It's the exact opposite. The dean denied this statement with a calm tone. The Granville family will send people to kill me. The Kingsford family will try to bribe me through conciliation. Actually, it's just a part of my plan. I knew it would end up like this. Hearing this, Natsuki and the girls couldn't help but be shocked. Plan? What plan? As expected, Wu Yin sighed when everyone was still in a daze. He enunciated each and every word clearly. You're the one who ordered the Granville family to send me to kill you, aren't you? The girls' hearts skipped a beat. The dean ordered the Granville family to send Wu Yin to kill him? As expected, you've already found out. The dean exclaimed in admiration. To be precise, I asked the Granville family to send someone to kill me, but I didn't specify you. The girls understood the situation even if they were slow. Behind the whole thing, there was an unimaginable inside story. What's the purpose? Natsuki was the first to calm down. What's the purpose of this? Hey, Wu Yin. The dean didn't answer Natsuki's question. Instead, he looked at Wu Yin with a smile. Do you know what a divine ingenuity is? Divine ingenuity? Natsuki's group of girls began to ponder over this phrase. A fully self-disciplined automaton. Wu Yin raised his head and said, It's a fully autonomous automaton that can generate magic power on its own, activate magic circuits on its own, and fight on its own, even without the puppeteer's control and supply of magic power. A fully self-disciplined automaton? The girls cried out in surprise. It was common knowledge that automatons were inseparable from mana and puppeteers. Once they were separated from their puppeteers and mana, the automaton was just a pile of scrap metal that couldn't perform any functions. It was the same even for a forbidden doll. After all, the amount of mana a forbidden doll could generate was too little. It wasn't enough for them to fight on their own. Therefore, without a puppeteer, a forbidden doll was just a toy that wasn't made of scrap metal. However, if an automaton could provide mana on its own like a human, it wouldn't be a problem if it didn't have a puppeteer. Therefore, there was the saying of a fully autonomous automaton. Countries all over the world were also doing research on this point. Unfortunately, until now, no country had ever developed a fully autonomous automaton. As for the fully self-disciplined automaton, its name was Divine Ingenuity. Chapter 1690. Why does an automaton exist? Even the noblest apprentice puppeteer or magician would be able to recite the answer to this question without breaking a sweat. In order to get rid of the tedious incantations and complicated magic circles, and to simplify and quickly use magic, the magicians developed the magic circuit, which condensed all the conditions for performing magic and used it as a substitute for the ritual when performing magic. With the existence of magic circuits that condensed all the conditions for a magic trick, magicians only needed to input magic power into the magic circuits to be able to perform the magic trick that was originally prepared and use the magic trick in an instant. However, the magic circuit was just a tool that prepared all the conditions for a magic spell. It replaced the existence of lengthy incantations and complicated magic arrays. Even if the magic was already prepared, magicians would still need to control the magic circuits, whether it was activated or used. In this way, although using magic was indeed much faster than without magic circuits, it was still not enough to satisfy some people when used in battle. Therefore, in order to pursue an absolutely simple and fast way to use magic, the automaton was born, and so were the puppeteers. With the automaton, the puppeteers could throw all the work of controlling the magic circuit to the automaton. They only needed to output magic power to perform the magic. To put it bluntly, the automaton was only created to allow magicians to quickly perform magic. Then, the use of the automaton was fixed. Battle. Apart from fighting, the automaton had no other reason to exist. It should be said that it was natural. With such meaning of existence, automaton became a tool used in war by various countries. However, even if there was an automaton, a puppeteer who could control the automaton was also necessary. Without a puppeteer, an automaton could not perform at all. Because of this, there were naturally people who wishfully wanted to create an automaton that did not need a puppeteer and was completely self-disciplined. Thus, the existence known as Machine Doll was born. Although it was said to be born, Machine Doll was more of an extravagant wish than an existence. This was because from the time it was proposed until now, no one had ever developed a machine doll. It was because of this that the girls were so surprised. What was the purpose of the dean's mention of machine doll at this time? As if he had seen through the thoughts of the girls, the dean closed his eyes. Developing machine doll is exactly my purpose. Hearing this, the girls looked at each other and more or less understood the dean's meaning. The so-called plan you mentioned, the one that even allowed others to assassinate you. Natsuki looked at the dean. Just to develop machine doll? That's my ultimate goal, the dean said self-deprecatingly. The Kingsford family is using the machine doll as a bait to get me to help them return to the political arena. The dean changed the topic as if he was trying to keep them in suspense. However, there are people who are unhappy about the Walpurgis machine doll's close relationship with England. England? Natsuki said in confusion. Isn't it the Kingsford family? The Kingsford family holds great power in England, as long as the Kingsford family reclaims their former position, the dean said with a faint smile. Therefore, if the Academy's relationship with England is too good, the other countries won't be able to stand it. After all, this Academy exists to provide excellent puppeteers to each country. It's also the cradle to strengthen each country's military power. And then? Natsuki looked at the dean coldly. What do you try to explain by saying all this? Don't you think this is a good opportunity to cut off the good relationship between the Academy and England? The Academy, Dean smiled. You're right. Let me give you a hint. The Granville family's young master is from Germany. Germany? Natsuki slowly understood. In other words, the Granville family didn't assassinate you to help the Kingsford family, but to destroy the cooperation between you and them? If the Granville family's young master destroys the secret agreement and shows me something that interests me, isn't that a good way to destroy the good relationship between the Academy and England? The headmaster stroked his beard and laughed out loud. As for the thing that interests me, I'm sure you've already guessed what it is. There was no need to guess what it was. Didn't the dean make it clear? His most fundamental purpose was to develop Machine Doll. You mean? Natsuki asked with uncertainty. Germany has already developed Machine Doll. To be exact, Germany's research has already reached a certain stage, and they've achieved some results. Wu Yin suddenly said, Young Master Granville's automaton, which is a real automaton, is a half-finished Machine Doll. Clap, 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 clap. The dean held the key of Solomon and clapped. You already know the inside story to this extent. That's impressive. That's right. It's really a half-finished Machine Doll. The dean generously revealed the deepest inside story of the whole matter. Germany has already developed a semi-finished product of Machine Doll, and if they show me a little of this result, I will be tempted to conduct joint research with Germany, ditch England, and join Germany. This is the purpose of the Granville family. Ridiculous. Natsuki scoffed. If that's the case, why would the Granville family send someone to kill you? Didn't I just say it? The headmaster smiled strangely. It's all part of my plan. Seeing the strange expression on the principal's face, the hearts of all the young girls sank. It's not Germany that wants the Academy to sever ties with England. It's you. Wu Yin looked directly at the dean. You asked the Granville family to send someone to kill you and destroy your agreement with the Kingsford family. That's just an excuse to sever ties with England. That's right. The dean waved his hand. It's impossible for the UK's research on Machine Doll to make any progress in a short period of time. If I want to develop Machine Doll, I have to abandon the UK and work with Germany. Just like you said, asking the Granville family to send someone to kill me and destroy my agreement with the Kingsford family is just an excuse to sever ties with England and join Germany. Displaying the half-finished Machine Doll is also to let the other higher-ups in the academy see clearly who is the best partner at this stage. Hearing this, everyone understood. Everything that happened was all part of the dean's plan. In the end, the Kingsford family didn't get any benefits at all. They became your pawns, and we became your sacrificial lambs. Wu Yin said slowly in a calm tone that made one's heart palpitate. Next, you only need to execute me, the assassin, and you'll be able to get out of the danger justifiably. You can accuse the Kingsford family of secretly sending people to kill you and cut off all ties with the United Kingdom where the Kingsford family belongs to. Then, you can join Germany, right? Yes. However, the dean replied with such a question. No, you're wrong. Chapter 1691. No, you're wrong. As soon as he said that, everyone was stunned and turned to look at the dean. I don't have the slightest intention of sacrificing you, or the people sent by the Granville family to kill me. The dean explained in a very sincere tone. Originally, I had planned to cut ties with the United Kingdom and draw up a cooperation agreement with Germany before making an appearance. Then, I would reveal the fact that you were being used, clear your name of assassinating the president, and allow you to continue living in the academy. Not Suki, Ikaros, Agrora, Cannon, and even the naive Astrea couldn't believe what they heard. However, Wu Yin sensed that the dean wasn't lying when he said this. The students studying in this academy are all outstanding puppeteers from all over the world. They are true geniuses, and you are a genius among geniuses. You are a treasure that can be compared to Magnus. The dean smiled. How can I let a talented student like you leave the academy just like that? Huh. Wu Yin snickered at the dean's words. It's a very sarcastic laugh. Everyone says that the Walpurgis Royal Tactical Academy is an academy where strength reigns supreme. Now, I finally understand who developed this theory. I'm looking forward to your performance at the night assembly. The dean ignored Wu Yan's sarcasm, and he continued with a calm expression. So step down. When the time is right, I will step forward and clear your name. Of course, I will also ask the Granville family to release Oliette. We will pretend this never happened. How about it? How about? As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding space was covered by a deathly silence. The heavy atmosphere continued to spread, and the tension that tugged at one's heartstrings involuntarily rose in the hearts of many people, causing the entire place to be silent. It was as if the sound of a needle dropping would enter one's ears. Not Suki, Ikaros, Astrea, Agrora, and Cannon all looked at Wu Yin. Needless to say, they were waiting for Wu Yin to make a decision. Wu Yin and the dean looked at each other, and after a while, Wu Yin spat out this sentence. Dean, didn't you just say that I don't know anything about this? I know. I know that you know a lot of things. The dean nodded without any change in his expression. Perhaps you knew from the start that I was the mastermind, right? Yes. Well, I can more or less guess what's going on. Wu Yin shrugged. Then, he looked at the dean with a meaningful look. Since you already know that I might know the inside story of the entire incident, why do you think I would be willing to be used by others and obediently come here to kill you? The dean stopped stroking his beard on the spot. Dean, you seem to have forgotten that there is an important explanation missing from your explanation. Wu Yin smirked. Why would the young master of the Granville family send someone to assassinate you and show you the half-finished product Machine Doll that symbolizes the secrets of a country? Why would he listen to you so obediently? Not Suki and the other girls came to their senses. The dean removed his hand from his chin and looked at Wu Yin. You seem to have a good relationship with the young master of the Granville family. Or should I say, the two of you have an unusual relationship? Wu Yin chuckled. So, I was thinking that if I killed you, the one who planned the whole thing and used me, wouldn't I be able to vent my anger and break the heart of the young master of the Granville family, who threatened me with Angeliette? The originally heavy atmosphere instantly turned into a swamp. Everyone present could clearly feel the pressure in the air. Natsuki and the other girls finally understood why Wu Yin listened to the orders of the Granville family's young master to assassinate the dean despite being threatened by the Granville family's young master. Just like what Natsuki said, Wu Yin was indeed planning something. It was a very simple plan. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he had bad intentions. It was because he knew that the dean was the mastermind behind the scenes and that the young master of the Granville family had a close relationship with the dean that Wu Yin obediently came to kill the dean. The reason was that simple. Student Wu Yin, the dean's tone is turning cold. This is not a wise choice. Even if you don't care about becoming a criminal, don't you want to be with your friends in this academy? You're willing to use your own students for your own purposes and then send them away after you've achieved your goals. That young master of the Granville family used Mariette to threaten me. Isn't it because your choices are too wise? Wu Yin looked at the dean coldly. And I hate you all. Naturally, I won't do the same thing as you. Wu Yin lifted his foot and walked forward step by step. You think that you can achieve anything by scheming against everything. However, even the wisest man will make a mistake. You didn't even consider the possibility of being killed by the Granville family because you are too confident in your own strength. The strongest magician of the 19th century? A grimoire from the future? A legendary level automaton? If these are what you're relying on, then let me destroy them one by one to vent my anger. Wu Yin walked forward and took out a card with a flip of his hand. It was a card with a picture of a knight wearing heavy armor and holding a long sword on the front, and the words saber, swordsman, right below it. Natsuki and the others looked at each other and backed away silently when they saw Wu Yin taking out a card. The headmaster was stunned for a moment and was a little puzzled. Could it be some kind of powerful magic equipment? The moment this question popped up in the dean's mind, Wu Yin got closer and closer to him. His mana surged out like an explosion. Like a raging storm, Wu Yin held the saber, swordsman, rank card in his hand. He stared at the dean in front of him while channeling his mana into the rank card in his hand. At the next moment, Wu Yin murmured as if he was summoning something. Dream summoning. As if waiting for the summoning, the saber card glowed brightly as soon as he murmured the incantation. Wong. The rich magic aura turned into a tornado-like airflow that surged out from the card and wrapped around Wu Yan's body. A blue, door-like geometric pattern rippled out from the card and spun around Wu Yan. As the door-like magic circle spun, Wu Yan, who was shrouded in the magic circle, started glowing brightly. The dean's vision was covered by the bright light, and he raised his hand to block it. However, as soon as he raised his hand and placed it in front of him, an alarm went off in his heart. Ishtar seemed to have sensed the same warning signs and shouted. The dean immediately understood and immediately held Ishtar's hand and injected the maximum amount of mana in his body into Ishtar's body. Heed my call. Come to me, my army. Ishtar raised his hand abruptly. Wraiths with painful expressions rushed out and stood in front of the dean and Ishtar like a shield. Almost at the same time, a shock wave blasted out from the bright light and crashed into the group of vengeful spirits that formed the shield. Bam! Accompanied by the sound of a collision, the group of resentful spirits that could corrode everything actually let out silent roars under the impact of the shock wave. Like a black fog blown by a gust of wind, they exploded and scattered. Both the dean and Ishtar trembled and raised their hands in front of themselves, trying to block the incoming shockwave. However, what landed on them was a gust of strong wind that blew them backward. The source of the shockwave was the wind. It was the wind that blew the group of vengeful spirits away. R1152. Chapter 1692. Many thanks to Night Creature and Huan In Huashang for their tips. In the vast space, the wind howled and howled, stirring up sand and dust that spread in all directions. The violent magic power was strong enough to prick one's skin. It was as if there were strands of electricity lingering in the air. The president and Ishtar did not intend to waste any time when the wind weakened. They raised their eyes and stared at the front against the howling wind and the dazzling light. When the dean and Ishtar saw the scene in the center of the bright light, both of them showed the same stunned expression almost at the same time, because what entered their eyes was no longer a gust of wind and a strong light, but a figure from behind, a tall and straight silhouette. The dark blue knight's robe fluttered in the wind, creating ripples one after another. The silver-white steel boots reflected the strong light in the surroundings and flashed with a cold light, sending chills down one's spine. The figure slowly turned around, exposing its face to the president and Ishtar. Only then did the president and Ishtar see it clearly. Under the dark blue knight's robe, there was a silver-white armor. The silver-white armor wasn't thick, and it didn't cover the owner's entire body. It only covered the chest and wrists, and the rest of the body was covered by the original pitch-black clothes. One white and one black, but it was an unexpected combination. Apart from the chest and wrists, the figure in the dark blue knight's robe was only wearing a pair of iron boots. Embellished with the dark blue knight's robe and pitch-black clothes, the figure exuded a strange sense of beauty. Looking at the figure standing in the middle of the dissipating light and wind like a noble knight, the dean and Ishtar almost thought for a moment that someone had come to the scene. But the eyes that stared straight into the eyes of the dean and Ishtar told them that the person they were looking at was the same person as the one who had not changed. Of course, if it was just a transformation, then it would be a miracle if it was just a transformation. That was not a big deal. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP. The moment they saw the figure, the dean and Ishtar sensed it. In his heart, there was a faint feeling of palpitations. Then, it definitely wasn't as simple as just transforming. Now is not the time for you to think about so many things. The dean and Ishtar couldn't help but wonder about the situation in front of them. An indifferent voice sounded. It reached their ears. If you don't pay attention to it, you'll be in trouble. Don't blame me if you die later. And BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP, and BP. On the opposite side, Wu Yin slowly raised his head. His wine-red eyes flashed with a cold glint. He raised his hand as if he was holding something. A vast amount of magic quickly gathered in his hand and turned into a whirlwind, swirling in a strange manner. Holding an invisible object that was swirling in the strange whirlwind, Wu Yin suddenly stabbed at the space in front of him without any fancy moves. Whoosh! In an instant, the strange whirlwind violently shot out and flashed through the void. It was as cold as a blade, and as fast as lightning, it flashed in front of the president and Ishtar. The dean and Ishtar keenly sensed that an invisible shockwave, similar to the one used to disperse the horde of wraiths earlier, was shooting toward them like an arrow. Their hair and clothes fluttered wildly in the wind. Their faces immediately changed. However, the dean was indeed the strongest magician in the 19th century. Before the impact hit him, he reacted in time and poured his magic power into Ishtar's body. Ishtar also reacted immediately. He raised his hand and summoned a dense swarm of vengeful spirits. The vengeful spirits covered the sky and collided with the incoming impact. Bam! In the next second, a strong wind rippled out from the center of the field, causing the ground to shake violently and crack open as if it was about to collapse. Cracks spread out from the ground in the center of the field, and the strong wind swept out. Some of the gravel was directly shaken into powder and blown away by the strong wind. Did you manage to block it? Wu Yin snickered, and he retracted his hand, as if he's holding onto an invisible gust of wind. In that case, why don't we try blocking it one more time? After that, under Wu Yan's fierce thrust, an impact twice the size of the previous one rushed toward the president and Ishtar. The dean didn't try to block the attack like Wu Yan expected. Instead, he channeled his mana and enveloped himself and Ishtar's body. His lingua glowed with a dim light, and the two of them levitated into the air, evading the attack. That was the power of telekinesis. Looking at the dean who used his telekinesis to fly up into the air, Wu Yin waved his hand that looked like he was holding something. After images of light and the sound of air breaking could be heard as he waved his hand. At first glance, it seemed to be a meaningless action, but the president and Ishtar's faces tightened. Swish, 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 swish. Wu Yin brandished his sword, and the strong winds turned into wind blades or invisible slashes. They rained down from the sky and covering the earth. Facing the wind blades that were invisible to the naked eye but could clearly sense, the president's face became more and more serious. The magic in his body surged in an instant. Ishtar suddenly clenched his hand, and a group of pitch-black, vengeful spirits appeared in a flash. The densely packed shadows overlapped each other, and in a short moment, they covered an area of 10 meters around the president and Ishtar like a black fog. Bam! 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 The wind blades fiercely struck the group of wraiths, causing a chain of explosions. Powerful winds spread out like a roaring flood, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Agarola, Cannon, and the other girls were watching the intense battle. They couldn't bear to look away from it. Bam! In midair, an abnormally loud explosion rang out violently. Two figures also flew out from midair. They staggered back a few steps before stabilizing their bodies and landing on the ground. That ghost! Ishtar's expression was incomparably ugly. The dean's expression was still solemn. He didn't say a word and continued to infuse his mana into Ishtar's body. As if to vent her anger, Ishtar waved her slender hand forcefully. In an instant, a meter-long ribbon of wraiths shot out from Ishtar's hand and flew towards Wu Yin. Staring at the mass of wraiths, Wu Yin clenched his fist, and a vast amount of mana surged out of his body. It turned into a whirlwind above his clenched fist. It looked like the whirlwind was wrapped around something as it howled and spun around. Under the watchful eyes of Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, and Cannon, Wu Yin didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced. His silver-white iron boots stomped heavily on the ground. He clenched his fists and fiercely slashed at the ribbon of wraiths. Clang! The torrent of wraiths didn't hit Wu Yan's body. Instead, it seemed to have been blocked by something. It landed on top of Wu Yan's slashing hand. The whirlwind howled, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. But after blocking the ribbon of wraiths, Wu Yan's expression suddenly sank. Whoosh! Above the torrent of vengeful spirits, a giant arrow made of vengeful spirits spun at high speed. While the torrent of vengeful spirits and the whirlwind were in a deadlock, the arrow mercilessly fell towards Wu Yan's face. Seeing that the surface of the pitch-black huge arrow was filled with faces howling in pain, a sharp glint flashed across Xiao Yan's eyes. He forcefully tightened his grip on something that seemed to be grasping something. Wind King Barrier of Blee and BPR. While in a deadlock with the torrent of vengeful spirits, the whistling whirlwind suddenly paused. Then, with a speed that could not be seen with the naked eye, it expanded like lightning and exploded. Bam! In an instant, a terrifying storm soared into the sky and swept across the area, quickly shaking and fluctuating. Asterisk boom. Asterisk asterisk boom. Asterisk under the impact of the storm, the vengeful spirit was scattered as if it had been shot away. Whoosh! The torrent of wraiths caused the torrent of wraiths to deviate from its path and soar into the sky, flying towards the horizon. However, the principal, Ishtar, Natsuki, and the other girls had no time to care about these things. This was because their gazes were all attracted by the sword in Wu Yan's hand. Chapter 1693. The gale and vengeful spirits seemed to have been covered at this moment as they all dissipated. Everyone's attention was on the sword in Wu Yan's hand. It couldn't be helped. That sword was just too eye-catching. The hilt of the sword was dark blue with a gem embedded at the top. The sword's handle was made of gold, and it was exceptionally dazzling. What was even more dazzling was the blade. At first glance, it was an eye-catching silver-white blade with a cold glint. However, upon closer inspection, one would notice that the silver-white blade would occasionally flash with a dazzling golden light. Without a doubt, that was a sword that could easily attract people's attention. At the same time, it was also a sword that would never let anyone doubt its sharpness. The Dean and Ishtar, on the other hand, felt a vague sense of threat from the dazzling sword. What is going on? The Dean's expression began to change. What did Wu Yin do? Why did he suddenly become so strong? What is that sword? The Dean who was thinking about this did not realize that his attitude towards Wu Yin had changed. If the Dean only treated Wu Yin as a talented student who could catch his eye, then at this moment, the Dean had unknowingly treated Wu Yin as a worthy opponent. Unfortunately for Wu Yin, the Dean did not care. No matter what the Dean thought of him, it did not affect him. Didn't I tell you? With the dazzling sacred sword in hand, Wu Yin stomped on the ground. As if he had teleported, he appeared above the Dean and Ishtar. Now, there is no time for you to think so much. The pupils of the Dean and Ishtar suddenly shrank. The sacred sword in Wu Yan's hand began to dance. It brought about a shrill sound as it pierced through the air. It also brought about streaks of sharp sword rays that were aimed at the Dean's vital points. Once when the swords hit the Dean, he would definitely die. He sensed the shadow of death brought about by the extremely sharp sword rays. The Dean's gaze also turned cold. Boundless magic power surged out of his body and surged into Ishtar's body. Ishtar's delicate body trembled. Vengeful spirits surged out of every part of his body like shadows. They rapidly danced around the Dean and Ishtar. Bang! 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 The sword rays that descended from the sky all landed on the dancing, vengeful spirits. In the midst of a series of dull thuds, the vengeful spirits exploded one after another. As the sharp sword rays exploded the vengeful spirits one by one, the ground where Ishtar was standing seemed to be unable to withstand the heavy pressure. Cracks that were nearly half a meter deep were left on the ground. Even the place where Ishtar was standing had 2 deep footprints on it. But in the blink of an eye, the dull thuds above his head disappeared and the vengeful spirits stopped exploding. The sacred sword in Wu Yan's hand spun abruptly. Countless blade rays coalesced at lightning speed. Boundless magic power surged out of Wu Yan's body like a flood. The sacred sword swept across an extremely tricky arc like a lightning bolt, miraculously avoiding the vengeful spirits one after another, and pierced toward the Dean's throat. Wu Yan didn't hold back at all. The Dean was infuriated when he saw how merciless Wu Yan was. He channeled his magic power into telekinesis, and he grabbed one of the vengeful spirits and dragged it to his throat. Boom! The tip of the sacred sword instantly pierced the vengeful spirit that was pulled to his throat by the Dean's psychokinesis and used as a shield. The vengeful spirit exploded. Wu Yan was surprised that the Dean actually used such a method to block his attack. Karo! At this moment, Ishtar suddenly raised one of his hands and aimed his palm at Wu Yan. A thick, black mist emerged from his palm, and vengeful spirits flew out one after another, pouncing on Wu Yan. A fishy stench drilled into the tip of Wu Yan's nose, leaving Wu Yan sulking. He didn't hesitate and slashed at the vengeful spirits with the sacred sword in his hand. PFFF. As soon as the sharp slashes collided with the vengeful spirits were instantly shattered into powder like volcanic ash. Poochie, 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 poochie. As the slashes landed on the vengeful spirits, ripping sounds filled the air. One by one, the wraiths were slashed into 2 halves by the holy sword. Then, they turned into ashes and dissipated. As time passed, the vengeful spirits dwindled and the Dean and Ishtar became more and more astonished. That sword! The Dean stared at the sacred sword in Wu Yan's hand in astonishment. It can actually come into contact with Queen Ishtar's vengeful spirits so many times without being affected at all. Even though Ishtar's vengeful spirits weren't truly invincible, there were still some existences that could resist them. But after coming into contact with such corrosive, vengeful spirits for so many times, the sword wasn't affected at all. The blade was still as dazzling as ever. This was the first time the Dean witnessed such a thing. Wind King enchantment, my lady I Blair. Suddenly, a cold bellow echoed in the air. Before the Dean and Ishtar could react, the dazzling sacred sword above their heads suddenly stirred up a whirlwind. Shortly after, a 10-meter-long, violent tornado-like impact burst out from the sacred sword. It flashed across the air, dispersing all the vengeful spirits in its path, and crashed into the Dean and Ishtar. Bam! Such a powerful impact directly scattered the wraiths and sent the Dean and Ishtar flying. If it wasn't for the Dean's timely use of telekinesis to support their bodies, the two of them would have crashed to the ground. Thief! Ishtar had never thought that he would end up in such a pathetic state. He was finally enraged. Ed, give me your magical power. I want to summon the second batch of troops. The Dean didn't object and extended his hand to Ishtar. But at this moment, the surrounding ground, trees, buildings, and even heaven and earth seemed to have turned into a dreamland as they flashed with a dazzling golden radiance. The Dean's outstretched hand came to a halt. His pupils gradually narrowed until they were the size of a needle tip. Then, he slowly turned his head and looked in the direction of Wu Yan. In the middle of the dazzling golden radiance, Wu Yan was wearing a dark blue night robe. His chest, wrists, and feet were covered with silver-white armor. He held the sacred sword in his hands high above his head. Suddenly, streams of golden light rose from the surroundings like shooting stars. They flowed towards the sacred sword in Wu Yan's hand and infused into the sacred sword. As the streams of light flowed into the sacred sword turned into a ray of light and shone in the middle of heaven and earth. It wasn't until the sacred sword turned into a ray of light that Wu Yan raised his head. His wine-red pupils met the eyes of the Dean and Ishtar, and an expression slowly appeared on his face as if he was reminiscing about a person who was about to die. In an instant, a fatal sense of crisis surged in the hearts of the Dean and Ishtar. Ed, cried Ishtar, alarmed. Magical power! Magical power! Ah! The Dean's calm image disappeared. The veins on his forehead bulged. The magical power in his body surged wildly and was absorbed by Ishtar. In the next moment, the Dean and Ishtar were covered by the wraiths that were as dense as clouds. In the next moment, Wu Yan closed his eyes and slashed the light in his hand. Excalibur! For a moment, the people who were closer to the Dean's mansion all saw it. A dazzling ray of light with a diameter of 10 meters suddenly shot out. It stayed in the air for less than a second. It shook the atmosphere and rubbed against the space. While it stirred up layers of violent wind, it swept past the Dean's mansion. Not long after, a huge protective barrier formed by crystals fluctuated in the space around the ray of light. It covered the direction of the Dean's mansion. Within the protective barrier, an even more intense light flashed. Then boom! Within the translucent protective barrier, in the fierce light, a deafening thunderous sound shook the air. It carried with it a shockwave that was enough to destroy everything. It raged wildly within the protective barrier. The ground collapsed. Trees and stones were sent flying. The Dean's mansion was completely reduced to ashes under the impact of the ray of light. The shockwave was relentless and continued to destroy everything within the protective barrier. After a long time. Chapter 1694. Boom! The dazzling light beam exploded within the translucent barrier made of crystals. Like a wave of fire, it engulfed the entire space within the translucent barrier. Perhaps the people outside did not feel anything, but within the translucent barrier, the temperature of the entire space suddenly rose by a lot. Under the effect of the raging wind and waves that were like waves of fire, the ground within the protective barrier collapsed from the pressure. The trees were either blown away or smashed into pieces. The headmaster's mansion was completely turned into ashes and was wiped off the map of the academy. Gotcha! kacha. Not long after, even the translucent barrier that tried to contain the shockwave and not expand the scope of the damage began to crack. Inside, traces of magic power leaked out from the cracks. Within the academy, everyone who was near the headmaster's residence and had heard the deafening loud noise were given a fright as they lifted their eyes in a daze. They looked towards the frightening shockwave that had engulfed the defensive barrier as their faces turned dull. In the vast academy, the surroundings of the headmaster's mansion were silent. Everyone who witnessed this scene could not help but feel their mouths dry up. They could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. A feeling of fear spread from the depths of their hearts. What's wrong? What happened? This was the question in everyone's heart. Inside the translucent barrier that was cracking, the ripples spread out. The shockwaves rippled out in all directions. With the explosion point as the center, everything in the vicinity suffered a devastating blow. No one knew how long it lasted. When the barrier was about to collapse and shatter, the shockwave gradually dissipated, revealing the place that was baptized. It could only be said that it was too horrible to look at. The ground was completely razed to the ground, just like what was written on the surface. The streets and trees were all a thing of the past. Everything was revealed under the sunlight. There was only real soil. Every corner was filled with scorch marks. Every place was filled with black smoke. Some places even had flames, as if they were trying to exterminate everything. Among the things that were left behind, for example, the rubble and broken wood were burning. This area was slowly turned into a real scorched earth. In a corner of this scorched land, a translucent barrier made of crystals with cracks all over its surface shattered with a bang. It shattered into pieces. Inside the shattered translucent barrier, Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, and Cannon had different expressions as they looked ahead in silence. About 20 meters away from where Natsuki and the other girls were looking, there was only one side of the wall left. It was a broken wall. In front of the wall, Wu Yin is wearing a dark blue night robe. His chest, wrists, and feet are covered in silver armor. He held Excalibur in his hand as he stood in front of the wall, surrounded by the light of the flames. The Excalibur in his hand was raised in front of Wu Yin as he thrust it towards the dilapidated wall in front of him. To be more precise, he was aiming at a figure floating against the wall. The wall. Of course, floating against the wall isn't the right way to describe it. To be precise, it was Excalibur that pierced through the man's shoulder and nailed him to the wall. Drip! Crimson blood flowed along the Excalibur and dripped onto the charred ground. Slap! The grimoire, named Solomon's Key, which came from the future and contained more than 50 extremely precious legendary-level automatons, slipped from the hands of the figure pinned to the wall like trash and fell to the ground. Ugh! After a painful groan, the principal slowly raised his head. His vision was a little blurry, but he was able to accurately look at Wu Yan. An ugly smile appeared on his face. I actually lost. Wu Yan held the hilt of Excalibur tightly in both hands. He lowered his body and maintained a charging posture. He looked up at the principal who was nailed to the wall with Excalibur pierced through his shoulder. You, who have calculated everything, did you think this would happen? Ow! How is this possible? As if the wound on his shoulder that was madly bleeding was fake, the dean smiled weakly without the slightest bit of pain. Although I have always thought that one day, I, who is known as the strongest magician in the 19 worlds, will lose to someone. But I never thought that this day would actually appear now, and the opponent is my student. If only I used my full strength. Use my full strength? Wu Yin lowered his eyes. Indeed, Ishtar has also said that she has a second batch of troops. In that case, it's hard to say that she doesn't have a third batch of troops, a fourth batch of troops, or even dozens of batches of troops. Not only that, you also have other automaton in your Key of Solomon. Indeed, you haven't gone all out yet. Although he said that, Wu Yin himself had not used his full strength either. His level and power are all restricted by the bracelet. He can't use any of his own power. However, the bracelet didn't restrict him from using items. It was because of this loophole that Wu Yin was able to use his class card in dream summoning. He was able to use the power of his heroic spirit to suppress the strongest magician in the 19th century. The strongest magician in the 19th century didn't use any of Ishtar's other armies. He didn't use any automaton. But Wu Yin didn't use any of his cards either, right? His strongest class card wasn't the saber, sword soldier. Not Suki, Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, Cannon, and the others didn't make a move either. They were all hiding their trump cards. Even the strongest magician in the 19th century would not be able to do anything if they used all their trump cards. Of course, Wu Yin isn't going to talk about this. Wu Yin pulled out his Excalibur from the dean's shoulder. Oomph! The headmaster let out a muffled groan as blood spurted out from his shoulder. His body brushed against the wall, leaving a hideous trail of blood on it as he slowly slid down and fell to the ground. Although his shoulder and other parts of his body were in excruciating pain, the dean still forced a smile on his face. So, Wu Yin-san, you should be done venting your anger, right? Wu Yin glanced at the dean who was lying on the ground. The Excalibur in his hand flashed and slashed across the dean's shoulder. Following such a crisp, tearing sound, an arm flew into the sky. This time, the dean couldn't hold back anymore. He hugged his severed arm and screamed in agony. Wu Yin exhaled in response to the dean's pitiful state. Now, I've vented my anger. Swish! Just as he finished his sentence, a shadow flashed in front of Wu Yin and raised his leg to kick Wu Yin. Unfortunately, before the shadow could kick Wu Yin, a spatial ripple rippled in front of Wu Yin. A chain glowing in purple light emerged from the ripple and lashed at the shadow like a whip. Bam! With a muffled sound, the afterimage was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. It glided in a perfect parabola in the air, but halfway through its flight, it stabilized and landed lightly on the ground. At that moment, the dean on the ground had already disappeared and appeared beside the ambusher on the ground. Beside the ambusher, another figure suddenly appeared. He squatted on the ground and pressed his hand on the spot where the dean's arm was severed. His gaze shot forward. His gaze was filled with murderous intent. Chapter 1695. The lock of discipline slowly retracted back into the spatial ripple. However, the spatial ripple didn't disappear just like that. Instead, it expanded to about 5 meters in diameter. Not Suki, Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, and Cannon appeared from the ripples in space. They stood in a straight line in front of Wu Yin with the Excalibur sword in his hand as they looked ahead. There were 3 people standing there. The dean was lying on the ground with a painful expression while holding his severed arm. Standing in front of the dean is a man wearing a pair of tinted glasses and looking at Wu Yin and Co. with a hostile expression. He is dressed like a deacon. The last one was an elegant young man who was crouching beside the dean while holding his severed arm. His eyes were filled with killing intent and anger. Wu Yin is the one who sent Wu Yin to kill the dean, the head of the Granville family's nightclub executive department, and his automaton, TTN, the semi-finished product named Shinobu, INEDLL. Shinobu appeared out of nowhere and ambushed Wu Yin. He was sent flying by Natsuki's lock of discipline. Of course, Shinobu wasn't here to ambush Wu Yin. He was here to distract Wu Yin and rescue the dean. Wu Yin and the girls stood in the middle of the scorched earth. They exchanged glances with Kazuma, who was standing not far away from them, causing the atmosphere to tense up. Looking at the killing intent and anger in the boy's eyes, Wu Yin raised an eyebrow and laughed. His laughter was very sarcastic. I say, head of the night meeting executive department, what is the meaning of this? The young man glared at Wu Yin. His expression kept changing between anger and killing intent, hesitation and struggle. It's a complicated mix of emotions, but he didn't say anything. That was only natural. Even if Shinobu opened his mouth, he wouldn't know what to say. I really want to know what kind of development this is. Wu Yin said with a smile that isn't a smile. You were the one who ordered us to kill the dean. Hearing this, The young man's face immediately darkened. That's right. He was the one who used Oliet as a hostage to threaten Wu Yan. He was the one who ordered Wu Yan to kill the dean. But now, he was the one who ordered his men to kill the dean. He personally saved the person he ordered to be killed. That's why Shinobu was speechless. Shinobu was slapping himself in the face. However, the young man really knew how to control his emotions. Realizing that he was slightly agitated, he closed his eyes and took a few deep breaths. When he opened his eyes again, he had the same annoying smile on his face as before. Oh, this is amazing. I didn't expect the famous Crimson Eyes to defeat the strongest magician of the 19th century. This is amazing. My goal isn't to defeat you. Wu Yan ignored the guy who's trying to change the topic. He looked at the guy with a deep gaze. My goal is to kill the academy head. Shinobu's annoying smile froze for a moment. He waved his hand elegantly. Thank you for your hard work. But this is enough. This is enough. Wu Yan asked a question he already knew the answer to. Why? Because, after thinking about it, killing the dean now will cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. Shinobu cursed in his heart, but he still maintained the smile on his face. Therefore, Dean, please spare his life for the time being. How can that be? Wu Yan's expression slowly turned into a sneer. For Oliet, I have to complete my mission, don't I? You. Shinobu clenched his teeth and lowered his head. After a long time, he sighed. All right, Crimson Eyes. You probably know about the agreement between the dean and the Granville family. So, I won't let you kill the dean. Of course, we won't trouble Oliet anymore. Just treat it as if you're putting on a show with us. How about you stop now? What a pity. That's a shame. This time, Wu Yan sincerely expressed his regret. Initially, I thought that you would charge at me like a madman after I cut off the dean's arm, just like that. Oh? Shinobu said with a fake smile. Why do you think so? Isn't that a matter of course? Wu Yan tilted his head and said something that made Shinobu unable to maintain his smile. After all, the dean of the academy is your biological father, the elf Peter, Alice, and you're not the only one. Alice Bernstein. Alice? Bernstein? Not Suki and the other girls were stunned on the spot. Shinobu, who lost his smile, stared at Wu Yan for a while before standing up. As the boy stood up, his clothes, skin, face, and every other part of his body were peeled off like petals, and they were blown into the distance by the breeze. Under everyone's gaze, Shinobu's skin turned white. His body began to protrude forward and backward. His hair grew longer and turned into a waterfall of hair. Not long after, a beautiful girl appeared before everyone's eyes. Her silver hair was like a meteor drawing a long trail in the air. It fluttered in the wind like a feather, hanging down to her waist. It shone with a dazzling brilliance. Her facial features were well-defined. Her eyes were slightly slender and her nose was high. Her eyes were like emeralds, shining brightly. This is a beautiful girl without a doubt. However, Wu Yan's expression didn't change at all. Not Suki, Ikaros, Astria, Agurora, Cannon, and the other girls' faces darkened when they saw her. It turned out that the boy who tried to use them was someone else in disguise all along. Should I say this is our first meeting? Her name is Alice. Bernstein's girl looked up and let out a light voice that could make one's bones go numb. However, what I'm more curious about is, when did you find out about my true identity? I can't help but laugh at your question. Wu Yan glanced at Alice. Didn't I tell you when we first met? When we first met. Alice frowned. Her mind wandered back to that day. The head of the nightclub's executive department, number 10 of the RNDS, Cedric Granville. Cedric Granville. In a meeting hall of the executive department of the night party, when Alice, who pretended to be the director of the executive department of the night party, was about to introduce herself, the man who was standing opposite her and was about to fall into her trap uttered such a sentence. Let's assume that you're that person for now. For the time being, just treat me as that person. Alice murmured and smiled bitterly. So that's how it is. I've been exposed from the start. Even my plan has been exposed. That's why you beat me in my own game and followed my orders to assassinate the dean? Well, it's not that, Wu Yan said with an indifferent expression. It's just that I'll be in a better mood if I do that. Then we really are alike. Alice pursed her lips into a smile. We're both scheming against others to please ourselves. Don't compare me to you, Wu Yin retorted without holding back. My motto is to not offend others unless offended. I'm different from you who dragged unrelated people into this mess just to please yourself. Even your soul is rotten. Thank you for your exaggeration. Alice showed a pitiful smile as if she had been praised. The reason I've lived until now is to obtain everything I love and then destroy them all. Is that so? Wu Yin nodded. Then, before I wish you success, I'll give you a piece of advice. No, a warning. I'm almost done with this game. Wu Yin looked straight at Alice. That's why you should stop messing around with Angeliette. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that your dear father won't lose another arm. Alice's smile froze on her face. Wu Yin, on the other hand, didn't even look at Alice. He turned around and left the scorched earth with the girls in tow. Chapter 1696. Buzz. As soon as they left the area of the dean's residence, Wu Yan's body flashed with a strong light. The dark blue knight robe on his body, the silver-white armor that covered his chest, wrists, and feet, and the Excalibur all turned into light particles amidst the rich radiance, gathering in the air and gradually condensing into a class card with the word saber. Reaching out his hand, Wu Yin took out the saber swordsman rank card. Looking at the picture of a knight holding a sword and wearing heavy armor, Wu Yin let out a long sigh. What do you plan to do next? Natsuki stared straight ahead as she walked forward. Do you still intend to stay in the academy? Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, and Canon looked at Wu Yin at the same time. It seems like they had the same question in their minds. Wu Yin glanced at the group of girls and took in their gazes. After pondering for a moment, he shook his head. Forget it. The replication of Eve's heart is almost complete. Besides, I've already chopped off the dean's hand. If I continue to stay here, things might become very troublesome. Although the headmaster himself had said that he had no intention of pushing Wu Yin out as a scapegoat, that was before the headmaster had laid his cards on the table. Now, it was Wu Yan's own idea to beat the dean into a half-dead state. It could also be said that he was using his own will to hurt the dean of the Walpurgis Wong Li Tactical Academy. Who knew if the dean would still turn a blind eye to it? Even if the headmaster really intended to let the culprit who cut off his arm continue to stay in the academy after his arm was cut off, Alice, that brainless fellow, might once again come looking for trouble with Wu Yin. After all, what Alice was after, to put it nicely, was something that pleased him. To put it bluntly, it was something that pleased him. It was a process of self-destruction. Therefore, it was hard to guarantee that Alice would not trouble Wu Yin again. Wu Yin was not afraid. However, it was better to avoid trouble if possible. Moreover, it was just as Wu Yin had said. The replication of Eve's heart had indeed reached its final stage. The third round of the Demigod Path mission was also about to come to an end. It was also because the Demigod Path quest was about to be completed. That was why Wu Yin had chosen to assassinate the headmaster for the second time today, in order to settle the grudge in the academy. As for why he chose today, the reason was simple. Tonight, 10000000, Eve's hearts were successfully replicated. In other words, by tonight, the third phase of the Path of Demigod mission would be completed, and Wu Yin and the others would be able to leave the Nimble Girl's unhurt world. Therefore, Wu Yin attacked the dean without any scruples and ended the chaos. And now, there was less than half a day left before night fell. With Wu Yin and the others' abilities, hiding for another half a day in the Walpurgis Academy without being discovered would be a piece of cake. Master, Astria pulled Wu Yan's sleeve. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. Aren't you going to bid farewell to Miss Charlotte? Wu Yan's footsteps stopped for a moment. He hesitated. Ikaros. Canon turned around and looked at Ikaros. Aren't you going to bid farewell to Miss Flay and Rabbi? Ikaros flinched. It's rare for her to be hesitant about something other than Wu Yan. I don't encourage people to leave without saying goodbye. Even though it was a prideful statement, Agrora said it in a timid tone. My other half thinks so too. In other words, Agrora's other personality, Nagisa Akatsuki, also felt that she should bid farewell to Charlotte. Listening to the girls, Wu Yan's hesitant expression became more and more apparent. Natsuki's red lips opened slightly. She wanted to say something, but she suddenly stopped and sighed. It seems like there's no need to hesitate. As soon as Natsuki finished speaking, a voice called out to him from not far away. Yen. In front of him, a fairy-like girl who was hugging a little dragon that was covered in wounds. A girl with 5 dogs, a young man with a girl in a kimono with a short skirt, and a man with an automaton with a humanoid figure ran over at a speed that was not considered slow. Looking at the group of 2 guys and 2 girls, especially the girl who was carrying a wounded little dragon and running towards him with an anxious and worried look on her face, Wu Yan's hesitation was swept away, and he bitterly laughed. Charlotte, Flay, Raisin, and Loki ran over to Wu Yan with their automaton. To be exact, after running for a distance, Flay, Raisin, and Loki stopped. Charlotte was the only one who ran over to Wu Yan. The distance between the 2 of them was only a short 2 to 3 meters. When the wine-red pupils and the azure-blue eyes met, waves of emotions surged within them. It was as if there were thousands of words that they wanted to say, but they couldn't say a single word. Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Agrora, Cannon, and the other girls moved away and walked over to Flay and the others. They started chatting about something. It was clear the girls wanted to give Wu Yan and Charlotte some space. A space to bid farewell to each other. Charlotte tightly hugged the silent little dragon in her arms and asked nervously, Did you? Seeing Charlotte's nervous expression, Wu Yan chuckled. Don't worry, I didn't kill the school head. I only taught him a lesson. Charlotte released a sigh of relief when she heard Wu Yan's explanation. At the same time, she also felt a bit confused. Lesson? A lot of things happened. Wu Yan did not explain. He merely smiled at Charlotte. You only need to know that you and your younger sister can live peacefully together in the future. That's enough. Seeing the smile on Wu Yan's face and hearing Wu Yan's words, Charlotte felt pain in her heart. She couldn't hold back her tears and started sobbing. Who needs you to meddle in other people's business? At the end of the day, you still can't be honest with me. Wu Yan bitterly smiled. And here I thought you would be a little more honest. I have always been this honest. After saying something that even she didn't believe, Charlotte rubbed her eyes and lowered her head. Are you planning to leave the academy? Should I say that her intuition is always accurate? Even though they only exchanged a few sentences and the content was completely unrelated, Charlotte could still faintly feel it. Before her eyes, the person she loved with great difficulty was about to leave her side. Even though I cause a lot of trouble, I'm not so kind as to clean up the aftermath. Wu Yan said with a teasing tone. What? You can't bear to part with me? Who would be reluctant to part with a pervert like you? Charlotte lowered her head so no one could see her expression. However, the words that came out of her mouth were squeezed out. Her heart was filled with sorrow. If you want to leave, then leave. I won't. You won't ask me to stay, right? Wu Yan said helplessly. That would be for the best. If you ask me to stay, I'm worried that I won't be able to resist. Charlotte bit her lips tightly. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't. In the end, she could only say such a sentence. Will you come back? That's hard to say. Wu Yan looked directly at Charlotte, and his voice became gentle. But when I practice with you, I'll definitely come back. Charlotte finally raised her head and met Wu Yan's gaze with her teary eyes. She didn't look away. If you lie to me, I'll blast you to smithereens. That's really scary. Wu Yan pretended to be afraid and patted his chest. Looks like I'll have to find time to practice with you as soon as possible. Of course, Charlotte said with her usual impolite tone. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him on the lips while he was still in a daze. You know the consequences of lying to me. Charlotte revealed her most beautiful smile. Wu Yan came back to his senses and smiled helplessly. Chapter 1697. The incident that happened in the Dean's Mansion spread across the entire Walpurgis Wong Li Tactical Academy in less than half a day. Although it was said to spread across the entire Walpurgis Wong, Lee Tactical Academy. In fact, what was spread out was that the entire area around the dean's mansion had been turned into scorched earth. It couldn't be helped. No matter how much he tried to hide it, it was something that couldn't be hidden. Under the strike of Excalibur's true name liberation, the scene of the dean's mansion being completely destroyed was witnessed by quite a number of people in the vicinity. If it wasn't for Wu Yin infusing his mana into Ikaro's body after releasing Excalibur's true name and allowing her to build an Aegis, absolute defense circle, the destruction wouldn't only be limited to the dean's mansion. How could such a huge commotion be hidden? Therefore, in less than half a day's time, the matter of the Academy Dean's residence being burned to the ground became known to everyone. Other than that, there was another thing that everyone knew. The Dean had lost an arm. It was also something that couldn't be hidden. The students of the Walpurgis Wongley Tactical Academy were in an uproar, and many speculations about the Dean's missing arm popped up one after another. Not long ago, Wu Yin attacked the Dean under the watchful eyes of the crowd and caused quite a commotion. Naturally, the incident of the Dean losing an arm couldn't escape the speculations of being assassinated by Wu Yin. One had to admit that although most of the rumors couldn't be trusted, they wouldn't come out of nowhere. That was the truth. Many of the students of the Walpurgis Wongley Tactical Academy believed in the speculations as well. However, just as many of them were feeling indignant about it, the dean, who was staying in the infirmary of the medical department, supported his pale face with a broken arm and announced something to the crowd. The one who tried to kill me was a man who disguised himself as the director of the nightclub executive department, Cedric Granville, the thief. After leaving that statement, the dean entered the medical department's dormitory once again. He started to recover. Not long after, the guards and the disciplinary committee of the Walpurgis Wongley Tactical Academy found the imprisoned Cedric Granville in a secret location. Cedric Granville. He had saved him. As a result, this incident was reduced to an invasion by foreign terrorists, and the case was finally closed. Since the dean and the higher-ups of the academy decided to close the case, even though the dean didn't explain why Scarlet Eyes attacked him, the other unrelated members of the academy couldn't say anything about it. The incident had a strong start, but a weak end, and the curtains were drawn. Regarding this, Charlot, Flay, Raisin, and Rocky, the four people who knew the inside story to a certain degree, remained silent and continued with their lives in the academy. As for what they were thinking in their hearts, only they themselves knew. The curtain of night gradually descended. In the depths of the forest of the Walpurgis Wongley Tactical Academy, Wu Yin stood in the center of an empty space. Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Nagisa, and Cannon stood behind him. Everyone's gaze was focused on the space in front of them. They were staring at a crimson ripple in space without blinking. They had been in this state for quite some time now. If one looked closely, they would notice that inside the crimson ripple, Wu Yin and the others were staring at a sphere that was emitting light. They were spherical hearts that were emitting light and beating rhythmically as if they were glowing. These balls were glowing and beating rhythmically like glowing hearts. They were none other than Eve's heart. In the space of Wealth of Kings, Eve's hearts were glowing like crystal balls. They were scattered all over the place without any order. There were so many of them that one couldn't see the end of them. It's only natural. After all, there are 1 million Eve's hearts. Just by piling it up, it was enough to form a small mountain. If the space of Wealth of Kings wasn't limitless, Wu Yin and the others would be worrying about how to carry so many Eve's hearts back to the Spalier world. Wu Yin slowly closed his eyes as he looked at the Eve's hearts in the Wealth of Kings. As if premeditated, when he closed his eyes, the system's robotic voice reverberated in his mind. Beep. Detected magic circuit. Eve's heart X 1 million. Ding. You have obtained a magic circuit. Eve's heart X 1 million. Ding. Congratulations to user for completing Demigod Path's 3rd mission. Ding. Demigod Path's 3rd mission completed. User can now choose to leave the current dungeon at any time. This instance dungeon is now open to the user. Once again, he entered the world of Nimble Girl Won't Get Hurt. The system will not issue any more instance dungeon quests. The user can enter and exit the world of Nimble Girls are unharmed, at will. Ding! The third phase of the Demigod Path mission was completed. The restriction bracelets on the user and his summoned figures are removed. Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Nagisa, and Cannon's bracelets turned into particles and disappeared into thin air. At the same time, a burst of power that originally belonged to the group of girls erupted from their bodies and returned to the control of the group of girls. Nagisa and Astria let out a joyful sigh when they felt the power that belonged to them returning to their bodies. My body feels like it has returned to how it used to be. How nostalgic. Their level and power were restricted by the restriction bracelets. It felt like something was missing from their body. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was unfamiliar. Nagisa, Astria, and Natsuki, Ikaros, and Cannon's expressions softened when they saw the return of their powers. On the other hand, Wu Yan's restriction bracelets disappeared. The power that originally belonged to him returned to him in an instant. 1 second, he was level 0, and the next second, he soared to level 89. That feeling of fulfillment, perhaps Wu Yan can understand it better than the girls. He closed his eyes, and his expression turned into one of exhilaration. At this moment, beep, user has completed the third phase of the Demigod Path mission. The fourth phase of the Demigod Path mission will be selected by the user. Beep, reminder, you have the right to select the next phase of the Demigod Path mission. The next phase of the Demigod Path mission will be automatically generated when the user enters the next dungeon. Beep. User may select any dungeon world other than the Astral Dragon Knight, Magical Girl Ilia, and Invincible Girl. The fourth phase of the Demigod Path mission will not be generated if the user enters the third phase of the Demigod Path mission. Please select a suitable dungeon world for the fourth phase of the Demigod Path mission. The sudden system notification surprised Wu Yan and the girls. Select the dungeon world for the fourth phase of the Demigod Path mission? Wu Yan exclaimed. Is this a benefit? Or is this a pre-existing setting? Isn't this a good thing? Natsuki heard the system notification and tapped the lace fan in her hand. This means you can select a dungeon world you're familiar with to complete the Demigod Path mission, right? That's true. Wu Yan smiled. Then, let's return to the Spalier world. Natsuki, Ikaros, Astria, Nagisa, Cannon, and the other girls nodded in agreement. Chapter 1698. The Otherworldly Capital. On the extremely wide streets that were a collection of styles from various eras, numerous young girls who were almost identical in appearance, height, figure, and expression were bustling about. Birds flew in flocks above the streets, chirping one after another, filling the entire capital of a different era with vitality. The sunlight illuminated this city from another era. The shadows of the buildings changed shape very slowly. Some were reflected on the ground. Some were scattered in the nearby forest, some were covered by girls who looked exactly the same, and some were completely hidden, appearing abnormally blurry. The sun was hanging high in the sky, but none of the Misaka sisters in the otherworldly capital were sweating. That was because the barrier that covered the entire otherworldly capital didn't block out the sunlight, moonlight, and starlight, but it didn't allow everything to enter the city. At least in terms of temperature, the otherworldly capital maintained a relatively warm temperature. The temperature didn't fluctuate much, and if the sunlight was too strong, it would be controlled to a suitable range. After that, the barrier would release the controlled sunlight into the city. Therefore, the streets of the otherworldly capital were filled with people every day. The moderate temperature didn't stop the Misaka sisters from finding a reason to stay in the streets. Walking into the streets, one could see the Misaka sisters interacting with each other. It was a heartwarming scene. In the center of the capital of alternate generations, in the topmost hall of the inverted pyramid-like building, the heart of generations, two extremely beautiful girls were gathered by the window, looking down at the scene on the street below while looking at each other. The street, Makoto muttered. It seems very lively. Inajika nodded, her expression absent-minded. Yeah, sisters. Makoto muttered again. Seems like they're having fun. Chuju nodded again, still in a daze. Yeah, shops. Makoto muttered for the third time. Seems like they're selling good stuff. Chuju nodded for the third time as well. Her delicate face was still in a daze. It was as if she just woke up. Yeah. After a short conversation, Hinajiku and Makoto looked at each other, and after a long while, both of them sighed. There are streets and shops. Makoto hugged her head. She groaned in pain. Why we have to stay here? Why can't we go shopping? This time, Chuju didn't look dazed, but her eyes twitched. Do you really want to know the reason? Makoto went silent. The reason? Was there a need to say it? Of course, it was because of Chuju and Makoto. She didn't want to experience it again. She had been stripped naked in front of 20,000 Misaka girls on the street, and then ran back naked in front of 20,000 Misaka girls. That encounter on the streets was deeply engraved into Hinajiku and Makoto's souls, leaving them with lingering fear. If it wasn't for the fact that there was only Misaka's sister in the otherworldly city and everyone else was girls, the two girls would have died long ago. No, that's not right. Even if there were only female Misaka girls in the entire otherworldly city, running back naked in front of 20,000 Misaka girls was enough to make Hinajiku and Makoto want to die. That time, it was simply a challenge to the shame of these two proud young girls. After that experience, no matter how crowded the streets were, Chuju and Makoto didn't dare to go out. Damn it! Makoto screamed like she was about to go crazy. Why isn't everyone out of the lake yet? It's just the two of us here. Isn't it too boring? Yukari is really something, sleeping in the middle of the day. Chuju couldn't help but complain. It's fine if she's sleeping, but at least she could give us an idea before she goes to sleep. Too bad our sage demons are nocturnal creatures. They sleep during the day and move at night. They hibernate during the winter. That's why we can't see Yukari during the day unless it's necessary. Perhaps at night, Yukari was the only one in the generational's heart. She might have the same problem as Hinajiku and Makoto. Who knows? Of course, it was more likely that Yukari would use the power of her gap to spy on the Misaka sisters' lives at night, and she would find pleasure in doing so. No matter what, it's much more fulfilling than Chuju and Makoto right now. Sigh. The two proud girls could only let out a sigh. They anxiously looked at the street below, their eyes full of yearning. Bzzz. Suddenly, the air in the middle of the hall vibrated as if it's being squeezed by something. Both Hinajiku and Makoto's ears twitched like squirrels, and they turned around to look at the source of the strange phenomenon. In the next moment, the three figures of a man and two women flashed out of the vast hall without any warning, appearing out of thin air. The man had black hair and red eyes. He wore a black shirt, black pants, and a black jacket. As for the girls, they had pink wings and pure white wings respectively. They were dressed in white with red edges and a red pleated short skirt. They were as beautiful as angels. It was very easy for people to mistake them for goddesses who had descended to the mortal world. Just their appearance alone was extremely dazzling. Looking at the three figures of one man and two women appearing out of thin air in the middle of the hall, Hinajiku and Makoto were stunned for a moment before their eyes lit up. Yen, Ikaros, Astria. The newcomers were none other than Wu Yen, Ikaros, and Astria, who just returned from the world of Nimble Girl. Natsuki, Nagisa, and Kanon transformed back into familiars and entered deep slumber inside Wu Yen's body. Wu Yen, Ikaros, and Astria turned around and looked at Chuju and Makoto. Yo, Wu Yen giggled. I'm back. Ikaros. Astria. Chuju and Makoto ignored Wu Yen and jumped in front of Ikaros and Astria. They hugged the angelic girls while they were still in a daze. You're finally back. Ikaros and Astria were a little confused by Chuju and Makoto's joyful behavior. However, they still hugged the two prideful girls back. The four girls hugged each other like best friends who haven't seen each other for a long time. In response, Wu Yen maintained his greeting posture. He was petrified and didn't react for a long time. What is this? Sisterly love? That's a good thing. But why didn't I get the same treatment? Thinking up to this point, Wu Yan's heart is filled with unwillingness. He turned around and looked at Ikaros and Astria, who were hugging Hinajiku and Mikoto. A stiff smile appeared on his face. Chuju, Mikoto, I'm back too. Wu Yan increased the force on the word also so that it sounded like he was shouting it out loud. Chuju and Mikoto finally noticed Wu Yan's return. They looked up from Ikaros and Astria's embrace and glanced at Wu Yan. Oh, Chuju and Mikoto grabbed Ikaros and Astria's hands excitedly. You guys came back just in time. We're bored. Come play some games with us. Yeah, the game console Ikaros made last time didn't come in handy, right? This is a good opportunity. Let's go play together. Yeah. Chuju and Mikoto chatted with Ikaros and Astria enthusiastically while ignoring him. Wu Yan's face turned red, then green, then white, and finally black. You guys. Wu Yan lowered his head and said in a low voice. He felt like he should reclaim his position as the husband. What's the meaning of this? Are you planning to rebel? Shut up. Chuju and Mikoto glared at Wu Yan. How do you know how bored we are? Bored? Wu Yan is flabbergasted. Oomph. Hinajiku and Mikoto didn't have the intention to explain. They just snorted coldly, grabbed the two angelic girls' hands, and walked towards their rooms. Wu Yan was the only one left in the room. His back looked bleak. Chapter 1699. Standing at the top of the heart of generations in the heart of the capital of alternate generations was an open-air rooftop. Wu Yan sat in an elevator that looked like it came from the future. He wanted to head to the top of the heart of generations. There was no other reason other than the diluted, miraculous pond water that allowed all the girls to undergo their metamorphosis in the lake, which was located on the rooftop of the heart of generations. Currently, Hinajiku and Mikoto were welcoming Ikaros and Astria into their rooms with an attitude that would make one wonder if they're trying to get into a lesbian relationship. On the other hand, Yukari was sleeping in her room. In other words, no one in the heart of generations would greet Wu Yan, who just came back from the Nimble Girl Won't Get Hurt dungeon and completed the Demigod Path quest with much difficulty. One has to say, this is a huge blow to Wu Yan. The heart of generations, the numerous girls he had, none of them accompanied him when he came back. They didn't even greet him. Wu Yan almost wanted to commit suicide because of this. Fortunately, Wu Yan used the excuse of, not all of my wives are like this. The others are undergoing their transformations to persuade himself to not commit suicide. That was how he managed to avoid the tragic ending of dying once. With this thought in mind, Kieran felt a sense of relief. Wu Yan missed the other girls, and he couldn't help but want to meet them. Of course, it was time for him to check on the girls' condition. It was said that they were undergoing metamorphosis, but up until now, the girls had been soaking in the lake. It's been so long since they last met. How could he not miss her? However, Chuju and Mikoto's cold shoulder made Wu Yan miss them even more. He wanted to talk to Yukari about the Demigod Path mission, but he decided to bring it forward. With the elevator leading the way, the rooftop of the Heart of Generations was getting closer and closer. They took the elevator from the top floor of the Heart of Generations. They were heading to the rooftop of the Heart of Generations. There wasn't even a floor between them, but Wu Yan stayed in the elevator for a full 5 minutes. Then, the elevator slowly came to a stop. Ding! A crisp sound effect was heard. The elevator finally came to a stop. The door of the elevator opened. Wu Yan could see the scenery outside. It was an open-air rooftop that covered a vast area. The ground was paved with red bricks, as if it was a carpet. Around him were walls that were like the surface of the water, constantly swaying as if something was flowing. There was no ceiling at the top. Instead, there were bars that looked like they were made of ceramic that formed a fence that covered the entire rooftop. There were canopies on both sides that could be opened with a button at any time. The canopies could be turned into a ceiling. In the center of the rooftop, there was a platform that was about 1 meter higher than the rest of the rooftop. There was a lake that looked like an extra large bathtub on top of it. Inside the lake, there were naked girls with their eyes closed, either sitting or lying in the water. They were Wu Yan's summons, the girls that were destined to accompany him until the end of the world. At this moment, in the lake where the young girls were soaking in, A clear stream that was invisible to the naked eye flowed through the water around the naked bodies of the young girls, entering their tender and slender bodies. As the streams of invisible clear water entered the girls' soft and slender bodies, the girls' auras were also changing. One moment it was strong, the next it was weak, and the next it was strong. It was a very rhythmic rise and fall. If one observed carefully, they would find that with every rise and fall, the girls' auras would break through the peak and advance a little. Although it was only a little, if they continued like this, they would benefit a lot. Looking at the girls who were soaking in the lake with their eyes closed, Wu Yin couldn't help but reveal a gentle smile. Eh! At this moment, a surprised voice sounded from the side of the lake. Wu Yin was stunned. He quickly turned his head and looked at the source of the voice. It was the bottom of the platform where the girls' clothes were piled up. Then, a petite figure entered Wu Yan's eyes. Her light yellow hair was kept to her shoulders, and on the left side of her head was a ponytail that reached her waist. She was only wearing a pair of white underwear, and her skin and hair were covered with water droplets that dripped to the ground bit by bit. The petite girl held a red and white shirt in her hand, as if she wanted to put it on her petite body that was only wearing a small piece of underwear. Maintaining her posture, the petite girl tilted her head and looked at Wu Yan, who was standing by the elevator on a rooftop. The surprised expression on her cute face froze. Wu Yan looked at the petite girl who was trying to put on her clothes. She looked at him with a pair of red eyes and didn't react for a long time. "What's wrong? You don't recognize me?" "Flander-chan, yes." The petite girl was Flander-chan? Scarlet. It wasn't until she heard Wu Yan's voice that Flander-chan finally reacted. Her red eyes lit up with joy. Flander-chan grabbed the clothes she was about to put on. She flapped her broken wings with colorful crystals hanging from them. She cheered and she charged at Wu Yan. Big brother. An extremely cute little girl, wearing only her underwear, was throwing herself at him. How would an ordinary person feel at this moment? Wu Yan didn't know what other people are feeling, but when he saw Flander-chan coming at him in such an unrestrained manner, he jumped in fright. He quickly caught Flander-chan in his arms. Big brother. Big brother, big brother, big brother. Flander-chan didn't care about her wet body. She hugged Wu Yan tightly and rubbed her head against Wu Yan's chest. Flan missed you so much. Wu Yan wanted to scold Flander-chan, but when he heard her words, all his emotions turned into love. He hugged her tightly. Big brother missed you too, really? Flander-chan lifted her head and pouted. She looked like she was throwing a tantrum. Then why didn't you come to see me? I've been staying in the lake all this time. It's so boring. Big brother wanted to do a mission. Wu Yan patted her head to comfort her. That's why you didn't come. So, you didn't come to visit Fran because you were too busy, right? Flander-chan asked with a hopeful look on her face. It's not that you don't want to see me, right? Of course it's not that I don't want to see Flan. Flander-chan's cute and funny words made Wu Yan smile and scratch her nose. Flan is so cute. Who wouldn't want to see her? Liar. Flander-chan's expression turned a little unhappy. Big sister locked me up in the basement because she didn't want to see me. Wu Yan tightened his grip on Flander-chan's wet body and sighed. It seems like Flander-chan still hasn't gotten over Remilia's decision to lock her up in the basement. Wu Yan kept a straight face even though he's thinking about it. What's wrong? You don't trust Big Brother? Of course I trust Big Brother. Flander-chan grinned as she rubbed her face against Wu Yan's chest. Her eyes were filled with longing for Wu Yan. Big Brother is different from Big Sister. Big Brother loves me the most and loves me the most. That's why I love Big Brother the most too. Wu Yan didn't see the love in Flander-chan's eyes, but from her actions and words, he could tell that Flander-chan likes him from the bottom of her heart. While this made him happy, it also made him like the cute little girl in his arms even more. You really know how to make Big Brother happy. I'm not trying to make Big Brother happy. Flander-chan wrinkled her little nose. Flan is telling the truth. Yes, 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 I know you're a good girl. Big Brother will give you a reward, okay? Okay. Her bell-like laughter reverberated in the surrounding space, filled with warmth. Chapter 1700. Heart of Generations, Top Floor Hall. Flander Chan's light yellow hair fluttered despite the lack of wind, bouncing up and down with its owner's movements. It was fixed to the left side of her head, and her waist-length ponytail swayed back and forth like a tail. Flander Chan looked like an adorable little animal, and Zhang Xian couldn't help but want to hug her. Right now, Flander Chan was wearing her unique goth lowly outfit that was mostly red with white sprinkles. On her head was a white beret with red ribbons. Like a child who just got a new set of clothes, Flander Chan stretched her petite body and twirled in a circle on the spot. Her short red skirt with white laces swayed along with her movements, causing her cute little face to be filled with a smile. It feels good to wear clothes. Flander Chan twirled around happily while showing off her body. Flander Chan didn't realize that her cuteness had increased by several folds. She almost made Wu Yin fall into a daze. Wu Yin slapped his cheeks, and he looked at Flander Chan with a peculiar glint in his eyes due to the system's perceptive sense. Flander Chan? Scarlet. Level 88. Level 88. Flander Chan is only one level away from reaching peak Tier 9. Wu Yin couldn't help but gasp in surprise. He's only at peak Tier 9 after all. He's only one level ahead of Flander Chan. Flander Chan's ability to destroy everything with a wave of her hand. This level difference is practically non-existent. Or rather, without using Ruby mode or summoning his familiars, Wu Yan's strength is nothing compared to Flander Chan's. Flander Chan may be one level lower than Wu Yan, but in terms of strength, Flander Chan at level 88 is stronger than Wu Yan at level 89. After the magical pond water's transformation, Flander Chan's improvement is huge. If I'm not mistaken, Flander Chan wasn't even level 85 before the magical pond water's transformation. The diluted magical pond water can improve Flander Chan's strength by so much. That's Flander Chan's improvement, such a voice said. At the same time, Wu Yan's mind was filled with questions. It rang in his ears. Then, a pitch-black spatial rift filled with ferocious eyeballs appeared in a corner of the hall, occupying the space in that corner. Yukari slowly walked out of the spatial rift with a parasol in her hand. She yawned as she walked, looking like she just woke up. "Sister Yukari." Flander Chan stopped twirling and called out in surprise. "You're awake?" Wu Yan was a little surprised. He quickly asked, "What do you mean Flander Chan's improvement?" "Yukari, have you forgotten how old Flander Chan's age is?" Yukari's half asleep, half awake. As a 495-year-old vampire with such a special ability, what level of strength do you think Fran should have? Yukari. Wu Yan immediately understood what Yukari meant. Flander Chan's mental age is equivalent to a child less than 10 years old, but she's a vampire who's lived for 495 years. Flander Chan's mind and spirit have been in an abnormal state for the past 495 years due to her ability. She would abuse her ability from time to time and destroy everything in front of her, including humans. Flander Chan was no longer affected by her own abilities because her powers were sealed by the sealing aura. Although her mental state was still that of a 10-year-old child, she wouldn't lose control to the point where she would kill for no reason. Flander Chan's mind and spirit are unstable, but she can still freely use her ability to destroy everything, let alone when her mind and spirit are stable. Of course, that wasn't what Yukari wanted to say. What she wanted to say was that Flander Chan had spent almost all of her 495 years in the basement of the Scarlet Devil Mansion. Naturally, Flander Chan didn't train herself like a normal cultivator for the past 495 years. Or rather, she didn't train herself like a normal cultivator. In other words, Flander Chan's strength hasn't improved since the very beginning. Flander Chan's strength has improved by leaps and bounds after 495 years with the help of the miraculous pool water. Don't underestimate Flander Chan for just a few levels. The higher the tier, the greater the gap between each level. Flander Chan's strength had more than doubled with just a few levels. With Flander Chan's ability to destroy everything in her path, other than Wu Yan, who has a familiar, no one else is a match for Flander Chan among Tier 9 cultivators. Is that so? Wu Yan sighed when he understood this. As expected, Yukari doesn't lack monsters. Yukari chuckled, but Flandre-chan puffed up her cheeks. Flandre-chan isn't a monster. Yes, yes, yes. The adorable Flandre-chan isn't a monster. She's a princess. Wu Yin patted Flandre-chan's head with a smile. Flandre-chan's dissatisfaction melted into comfort. Watching Wu Yin and Flandre-chan getting along so well, Yukari yawned again. She sat down on the sofa and crossed her legs. She looked at Wu Yin with a pair of purplish eyes filled with wisdom. The third round of the Demigod Path mission is over, right? Wu Yin picked up Flandre-chan and sat across from her. Flandre-chan happily wrapped her arms around his neck. The third round of the Demigod Path mission is much smoother than the second round. In fact, if I don't count the fact that I obtained the mission item in advance, the third round of the Demigod Path mission is the smoothest so far. I can tell just by looking at your face. Yukari tapped Wu Yan's forehead with the paper fan in her hand. So, when do you plan to proceed with the fourth round of the Demigod Path mission? I wanted to discuss this with you after you woke up. It's good that you're awake now. Wu Yin giggled. Actually, for the fourth round of the Demigod Path quest, I can choose the instance dungeon to complete. The system will automatically generate the fourth round of the quest after I enter the instance dungeon of my choice. Yukari's eyes lit up. She glanced at Flandre-chan in Wu Yan's arms and looked at Wu Yin meaningfully. You can't be thinking of... I can't hide anything from you. Wu Yin tightened his grip on Flandre-chan and stared at Yukari. I've decided that I'll proceed with the fourth round of the Demigod Path mission in Yukari. Yukari's expression said, I knew it, while Flandre-chan froze. Going back to Yukari? Flandre-chan didn't know what to do. In other words, Flan is going back to the Scarlet Fiend Mansion? Wrong. Wrong. Wu Yin pinched Flandre-chan's nose. We're going back to the Scarlet Fiend Mansion. Flandre-chan paused for a moment. The bewilderment on her cute face disappeared and was replaced by uneasiness and a little bit of anticipation. Oni-chan, are you going to accompany me to see my sister? Yes. Yeah. Wu Yin adjusted Flandre-chan's body so that she's facing him. She's looking at him with a pair of anxious yet expectant eyes. What do you think? Do you want to go back to the Scarlet Fiend Mansion with me? Flandre-chan lowered her head. Her body twitched slightly due to her master's complicated thoughts. In the end, Flandre-chan couldn't overcome her longing and murmured, I wonder if my sister is angry that I haven't been home for so long. Wu Yin chuckled when he heard that. This cute little girl sure has complicated feelings for her sister. She likes her sister, but hates her at the same time. No wonder she's so conflicted when it comes to returning to Yukari. That's good too. Yukari closed her eyes and showed a nostalgic expression. It's been a long time since I saw Ling Ming, Yuzi, Indigo, and Orange. It's good to go back. That's settled then. Wu Yin decided on their next destination with just one sentence. Yukari is a place you're familiar with. You won't be so stupid if you do a mission there. Yukari nodded casually. Her eyes rolled around with a hint of a smile. Wu Yin and Flandre-chan were too immersed in the topic of Yukari and the Scarlet Fiend Mansion to notice this. Just as Wu Yin, Flandre-chan, and Yukari decided to return to Yukari, something strange happened in one of the areas in the Behemoth Forest. It's a flat area filled with gravel of all sizes. The trees in the area seemed to have been plowed and disappeared without a trace. And in this flat ground that was littered with all kinds of big and small stones, in one of the corners, traces of black fog suddenly rose. Crack! The black mist rose like the wind, and the ground cracked open with a cracking sound. The mist grew thicker and thicker. Boom! Until a certain moment, the black fog seemed to have exploded, causing the ground to explode, creating a crater. Whoosh! In the incomparably dark pit, a figure shot out from the black fog and arrived in midair. Ha ha ha! Not long after, a burst of wild laughter resounded from the figure that was hovering in the air. Chapter 1701. The next morning, on the top floor of the Heart of Generations, Hinajiku, Mikoto, Ikaros, and Astria were standing in a row with their gazes focused on the front. In front of Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, and Astria were Wu Yin with Flandrachan in his arms and Yukari, who was yawning with her parasol in hand. "Master," Ikaros said worriedly when she saw Wu Yin hugging Flandrachan. "Can I go with you? You really don't need us to go with you?" Just as Ikaros finished her sentence, Hinajiku, who was frowning her beautiful eyebrows, also spoke up. "Although I've heard from you that there are many high-level monsters and gods in the fantasy village, we're all at level 9 now. Even if we can't be ranked as strong in the fantasy village, we're still considered experts, right?" This was the truth. Fantasy Village was not an instance world. It was just a small area within an instance world. On the surface, there was nothing mysterious about the world of Fantasyland. It was just like an ordinary world. The people there didn't believe in the existence of ghosts, monsters, gods, and so on. They didn't even have the factor that allowed them to enter the game world to experience the game like the Sword and Saber Dominion. It was an extremely ordinary world. However, in a corner of that world, a place called the Fantasy Village existed in a place that people could not reach. The reason why people didn't believe in any mysterious existence was because all the mysteries were concentrated in the place called Fantasy Village. Spectre, demon, gods, vampires, all kinds of creatures that did not exist in common sense lived in a fantasy land. As for Fantasy Village, it was covered by a barrier known as the Great Bali Barrier. The creator of Fantasy Village, Violet, who is also known as the Sage of Monsters, had also added a barrier that separated illusion and reality. Under the effect of these two enchantments, although it could not be said that the Fantasy Village was completely isolated from the outside world, under normal circumstances, people could not enter the Fantasy Village. The ghosts, monsters, gods, and so on in the Fantasy Village, except for a few special cases, could not enter the human world. Since there were all kinds of mysterious creatures in the Fantasy Village, there were even gods among them. The power level in the Fantasy Village was generally high. Even so, a level 9 monster was still considered a powerhouse in the Fantasy Village. This could be seen from Flandrachan's behavior. Flandrachan's strength wasn't at the top of the ladder in Fantasy Village, but she was at the top of the ladder where a great monster like Yukari existed. Before becoming Wu Yan summoned, Flandrachan was already at level 9. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, and Astria were also at level 9. They were definitely qualified to enter the Fantasy Village. Unfortunately, I didn't say that you guys aren't strong enough. It's just that the system stated that I can only bring 2 summons with me during the Demigod Path quest. Both Violet and Flandrachan are already full, Wu Yin said helplessly. Moreover, you guys have underestimated the Fantasy Village. Indeed, your levels are definitely ranked high in the Fantasy Village. However, the most terrifying thing about the Fantasy Village is that even the low-level existences possess terrifying special abilities. That's right. That's right. That's right. The scariest thing about the Fantasy Village isn't the high-level existences. It's the fact that even the low-level existences have special abilities that can't be ignored. Thinking about Purple, the power of Realm could create and destroy everything. How terrifying was that? With the power of Realm, even if she was facing someone of a higher level than her, as long as the gap between them wasn't too big, she would still have the absolute upper hand. Flandrachan, on the other hand, could destroy anything with a wave of her hand. When she was first summoned, she was only level 82, but she was able to defeat the long-arm Ape King, which was only 1 or 2 levels lower than her. Flandrachan was almost invincible among the Tier 9 demons. However, in the Fantasy Village, there are even scarier abilities than that. Anyone with a special ability can be pulled into the Spalier world. They might not be able to challenge someone above their level, but it's not hard for them to be invincible among the same level. Chuju and Mikoto are the type that don't have special abilities. Ikaros and Astria have Pandora mode, but it only increases their power. It doesn't grant them any special abilities. It's not going to be easy for them to deal with existences that aren't weak and have special abilities. If Wuyin didn't have Violet and Flandrachan's Ruby mode and his trump card familiar, he wouldn't be able to get a good position in the fantasy village with his current strength. Makoto sighed. I wanted to visit Violet and Flanderchan's hometown. Astria puffed up her cheeks angrily. I really want to go too. There will be plenty of opportunities in the future. Z glanced at the group of girls, and a gentle smile appeared on her face. If it's you guys, I will always welcome you on behalf of the fantasy village. This time, let me experience it first. Wu Yin comforted. How about we all go on a trip to the fantasy village after everything is over? All right. Chuju, Mikoto, Ikaros, and Astria nodded reluctantly. It won't be long before Shokuho comes out of the lake. Violet opened the paper fan in her hand and covered the lower half of her face with it. With Shokuho and your current strength, you won't be able to find anything in the Spalier world that can threaten the otherworldly capital. So, don't worry too much. Understood. Chuju and Mikoto nodded. Be careful. Master, Ikaros and Astria spoke up. Be careful. Remember to take care of yourselves, too. Wu Yin glanced at the four girls before taking a step back. He exchanged glances with Yukari, and after Yukari nodded her head, he yelled out the order. System, enter the fantasy village. A strange wave of energy appeared out of nowhere and enveloped Wu Yin, Flandrachan, and Yukari. It felt like they were being dragged to some unknown place. In the next moment, the three of them disappeared on the spot without any warning. There was no trace of them at all. In a daze, Flandrachan felt a little dizzy. Her vision was distorted and turned white, causing her to feel very uneasy. Oni-chan, Flandrachan tried to crawl into her Oni-chan's embrace. But what made Flandrachan panic was that the embrace that had been holding her from the start suddenly lost its warmth and sense of reality. It felt like she was abandoned. Flandrachan's uneasiness turned into panic. Panicking, Flandrachan tried to call out for her brother, hoping to hear his voice. But before she could do so, she felt herself falling into a soft spot. At the same time, a familiar scent entered Flandrachan's nose. Flandrachan felt nostalgic, but at the same time, she had a bad feeling. Immediately, Fran opened her eyes and took in everything in front of her. What entered Flandrachan's eyes was a dimly lit room. The room was much bigger than a normal family's room. It was more than enough to be used as a living room. The ground was paved with stone bricks of various colors, just like the Wanhua mirror. If there was light shining on it, it should reflect a good luster. However, the room was empty. There was nothing in it except for a luxurious bed. At this moment, Flandrachan was sitting on the bed. She scanned her surroundings, and her face turned slightly pale. This room is all too familiar to Flandrachan. He was so familiar with it that he could count the number of bricks here with his eyes closed. That's because Flandrachan had been locked up in this room for hundreds of years. A lingering sense of loneliness permeated the entire room as well as Flandrachan's heart. Flandrachan's pretty face turned pale and eventually turned deathly pale. Is Flandrachan going to be alone in the basement for a long time? R1152. Chapter 1702. To Flandrachan, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that this basement was her room, because Flandrachan had stayed in this basement for hundreds of years, longer than any other place in the world. But staying in a room like this for hundreds of years, all by herself, was a constant torment to Flandrachan. In the past, Flandrachan's mental state had always been in an unstable state. She was occupied by this annoying sense of loneliness, which caused her to destroy everything in this room more than once. It was also because of this that Flandrachan's room only had a bed and nothing else. Under such circumstances, how could Flandrachan not hate her sister and Remilia for locking her up in this basement? Of course, it was more of a feeling of grievance and resentment. After all, Flandrachan liked her sister a lot. If there was one thing that Flandrachan hated, it would undoubtedly be this basement where she had been alone for hundreds of years. Flandrachan already hated this basement when she was alone. Now that she had tasted freedom in another world, she had tasted love from Wu Yin, and she had tasted love from the young ladies around her. What about now? Flandre was afraid when the familiar loneliness of this room crept into her heart. She was really afraid. She was afraid that she would have to stay in this cold little world for a very long time. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to enjoy the freedom of the outside world. She was afraid that she wouldn't be loved by her sister who wasn't related to her by blood. She was even more afraid that she would never be able to see the brother who saved her from this cold world, who gave her a steady state of mind and spirit, who gave her warmth and love. Flandre face turned pale, and she couldn't help but shake her head. No, no, I don't want to stay in this basement. I don't want to be unable to see Big Brother. No. Flandre wine-red eyes glinted with blood-red radiance. She turned her gaze to the entrance of the basement with a determined expression. Shing! Flandre transformed into a streak of light and darted toward the entrance of the basement. She headed toward the entrance of the basement. He reached out his hand and shook it firmly. Boom! In the next second, the basement door exploded into a pile of debris with a muffled sound. The sound of explosions spread far and wide. It reached the ears of everyone who lived in the Red Devil Mansion. Immediately, everyone in the Red Devil Hall was shocked. What's wrong? In the kitchen of the Red Devil Hall, a young girl who was cooking something suddenly turned her head and looked outside the kitchen. What happened? Outside the entrance of the Red Devil Mansion, a plump young girl tilted her head in confusion. His gaze swept across the room. There seems to be some kind of abnormal sound just now, right? This voice, in a library in the Red Devil Mansion, a young girl who was buried in a pile of books and holding a book in her hand raised her head, her face full of surprise. It seems to be coming from the basement. Basement, in a vast and luxurious room in the Red Devil Mansion. A petite girl sat up from the bed with all her might. A serious expression appeared in her scarlet eyes. Flandre. The sound of the explosion echoed clearly in the castle-like basement, causing all kinds of chaos in the Red Devil Mansion. All the maids in the Red Devil Mansion were in an uproar. Some stood in place, not knowing what to do. Some chose to run to the kitchen, as if they knew there was someone who could make a decision there, and some of them were a loss. However, there were also some maids who let out terrifying screams. These screaming maids all discovered a figure flying over their heads. It wasn't until they finally saw the general appearance of the figure that flew over their heads that they screamed. Not good, not good, not good. Second Miss escaped. Second Miss escaped from the basement. Amidst the panic screams, the Red Devil Hall, which had been very quiet not long ago, seemed to have turned into a crime scene where a terrorist had launched a terrorist attack. Screams, clamors, and chaos could be heard incessantly. Flandre, who was flying toward the entrance of the Red Devil Mansion, didn't care about these noises at all. Right now, Flandre only had one thought. That was to get out, and find Wu Yen. Maybe it's because she was trapped in the basement of the Red Devil Mansion for a few hundred years. Flandre wanted to see Wu Yen as soon as possible. She wanted to jump into Wu Yan's arms as soon as possible. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to get rid of the loneliness and fear in her heart. Shing! Flandre speed rose to another level under the influence of such emotions. She streaked across the air like a fighter jet, heading toward the entrance of the Red Devil Mansion. The Red Devil Mansion was indeed huge, bigger than most castles. However, with Flandre speed, she didn't need much time to cover the entire place. It didn't take long for Flandre to fly out of the hallway and into the largest hall on the first floor of the Red Devil Mansion. Seeing the door leading to the Red Devil Mansion in front of her, Flandre face was filled with joy, but it immediately changed, and she stopped in her tracks. Shing, 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 shing. A series of sonic booms resounded in the hall, slicing through the atmosphere and turning into streaks of silver light. They brushed past Flandre body and shot past her as she slammed on the brakes. If Flandre didn't stop just now, the silver light would have landed on her by now. As for those silver lights, they were flying daggers that flickered with cold arcs of light. After the flying dagger flew past Flandre and stopped her in midair, several figures appeared in front of the gate leading to the Red Devil Mansion's outer court. For young ladies of different sizes were arranged in a square formation, but all of them had stunning looks. Standing on the left was a young lady with silver hair. She had a head of silver shoulder-length hair that hung down slightly, with sideburns on both sides of her silver hair. Her hair was tied into a small braid, and at the end of the braid was a green ribbon that fluttered with the movement of the braid. The young lady wore a blue and white made attire with a white, pleated hairband on her head. Her skirt only reached her knees, and she wore stockings on her feet. Obviously, she was a maid. However, the maid was still holding 2 flying daggers in her hands. Her beautiful eyes stared straight at Flandrachon with a sharp glint in them. She didn't look like a servant at all. Instead, she looked valiant and heroic. Standing on the right was a young lady with long, red hair, wearing a simple black and white dress. Her red hair reached her waist and draped down her back like a waterfall. There weren't any curls on her hair. It was the standard long, straight hair. The red-haired girl had a pair of bat wings on her head like hair accessories. She also had a pair of bat wings on her back, but they were much bigger. She looked like a demon from the legends. Standing behind her was a young lady with long purple hair. Her purple hair was also long and straight, hanging down her back naturally. The front of her hair was tied into 2 bundles with ribbons in front of her. She was wearing pajama-like clothes. The inner layer of the clothes was fluffy and comfortable with purple and lavender vertical stripes, while the outer layer was a lavender long coat with lotus leaves at the hem. On her head was a round beret with a crescent moon ornament. Her clothes and hat were tied into blue and red ribbons with ribbons. Compared to the 2 young ladies in front of her, she looked a little weaker. As for the one standing at the front, she was about the same height as Flandrachon and appeared to be around 10 years old. The petite young lady had a pair of wine-red eyes and shoulder-length bluish-purple hair like Flandrachon. She wore a goth lowly attire that leaned toward white, the color of cherry blossoms. On her head was a beret like Flandrachon. She also had a small canine tooth. On the other hand, the petite girl looked just as adorable as Flandrachon. In fact, they looked very similar. However, this petite young lady didn't have broken wings on her back. Instead, she had a pair of perfect bat-like wings. Chapter 17:03. Flandrachon's scarlet eyes dimmed a little as she looked down at the 4 girls who had different temperaments and stunning appearances, but they were all the same. Flandrachon's eyes were filled with joy. Remilia? Scarlet. Level 80. This is the petite girl standing at the head of the group. 16 knights. Level 78. She was the valiant servant girl standing on the left. Patrice? Nariki. Level 78. This was the girl with a delicate temperament standing at the back. Imp. Level 70. This is the demonic girl standing on the right. The 4 girls raised their heads and stared at Flandrachon, who was floating in the air with a serious expression. The girl named Little Devil even looked a little scared, causing the atmosphere to become tense. Remilia took a step forward and looked at Flandrachon, who was floating in the air. Her childish voice was filled with anger as she yelled, "Who allowed you to run out of the basement?" Flandrachon, who hadn't seen her family for a long time, couldn't help but feel like a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. The joy in her eyes instantly disappeared, and the scarlet light in her eyes shone brightly once more. Flan wants to go out. Go out? Remilia furrowed her brows. Reluctance was written all over her face. Go back to the basement obediently, or I'll get angry. Hearing Remilia's words, before Flandrachon could say anything, Zoyi stood up and spoke with a clear voice. "Second miss, you should go back to the basement quickly. Miss is really angry this time." Remilia was naturally very angry. Even though Remilia loved her sister dearly, she didn't want to lock her sister in the basement. But Flandrachon's strength was too strong, and her desire for destruction was too great. She would often recklessly destroy everything around her, and sometimes even the girls would be affected by her actions. There was no way. Remilia could only lock Flandrachon in the basement. Therefore, in the past, It wasn't like Flanderchan hadn't broken out of the basement before, but it was rare for her to cause such a commotion in the entire Red Devil mansion. Plus, Flanderchan was making a ruckus out of nowhere. Remilia was in a terrible mood. It would be strange if she wasn't angry. Unfortunately, no matter how angry Remilia was, it was useless against Flanderchan. Just be angry. It's not like you haven't been angry before, sister. Flanderchan yelled like a child throwing a tantrum. Flan wants to go out anyway. Even if you're my sister, if you stop me, I'll beat you down. You, Remilia, cried out in exasperation. Flan, do you really want to make me angry? Seeing Remilia's exasperated look, Flanderchan's heart softened and she snorted softly. As long as you don't stop me, I won't make you angry. You're pissing me off right now. Remilia glared at Flanderchan. If you don't want to make me angry, then go back to the basement obediently. Milady. Patrice looked at Flanderchan and spoke softly. Listen to Remy this time. Go back to the basement, basement, basement. You only know how to make me go back to the basement. Flanderchan's face was filled with anger. Flan will never go back to the basement again. Second miss, you should go back to the basement. Zui advised earnestly. First miss wants you to go back to the basement for your own good. That's not it. Flanderchan snorted. Sister just doesn't want Flanderchan to destroy the things in the house. That's why she locked Flanderchan in the basement. Is this for Flanderchan's own good? Remilia, Patrice, Black Knight, and the little devil were all speechless at Wu Yan's words. At the same time, they were secretly shocked. They were shocked that Flanderchan could come up with such rational words. In the past, Flanderchan had always complained that Remilia locked her in the basement because she hated her. Even if other people's lips were rotten, Flanderchan would still think so. After all, Flanderchan's mental state had always been unstable. How could she possibly listen to someone else's explanation? It's no wonder Remilia and the others were shocked that Flanderchan was able to analyze the situation so clearly. Since you know the reason as well, then you should understand Remy's situation. Patrice softly uttered each word. Remy will be troubled if you make such a big fuss. Flanderchan just wants to go out. Flanderchan's patience was almost worn out. Her words were harsh. Get out of the way. Otherwise, Flanderchan won't be polite. Patrice, Black Knight, and the little devil cursed inwardly. Remilia dotes on her little sister, but her temper is abnormally bad. Now that Flanderchan had said something like that, Remilia would definitely not let the matter rest. Not polite. I would like to see how you're going to be rude. As expected, Remilia laughed out of anger. Patrice, Black Knight, capture Flanderchan. Remy, milady. Remilia and Zai seemed to want to say something, but they were immediately shut up by Remilia, whose face was filled with anger. Hurry up. Looking at Remilia's angry appearance, Patrice and Black Knight knew that there was no room for negotiation and could only take deep breaths. Little devil. Patrice glanced at the little devil. If the opponent is little sister, it's too dangerous for you to be here. You should leave first. The little devil didn't object. She knew what she was capable of and obediently retreated. At this moment, Patrice flipped her hand and revealed a thick book. She looked straight at Flanderchan. Little sister, it's not too late for you to return. It's right for you to obstruct Flanderchan. Flanderchan's eyes glowed red. Since that's the case, Flanderchan will defeat all of you. You two sisters are so stubborn that it's giving me a headache. Patrice smiled bitterly. She raised the book in her hand, and a majestic, magical aura surged from her body. Water Talisman, Princess of the Water Spirits. Her ethereal voice reverberated in the surroundings like an incantation, causing the thick tome in Patrice's hand to emit an intense multicolored radiance and surge with massive mana. That book was actually a book of the demonic Tao. Wong. In the next instant, an icy blue magic formation appeared above Flanderchan's head. It expanded to a diameter of 2 to 3 meters and rotated on the spot. As the blue magic array rotated above Flanderchan's head, A translucent barrier emerged from the magic array and transformed into a hollow pillar of light. The pillar of light then descended from the sky and trapped Flandrachon inside like a cage. Flandrachon scanned the surroundings with her scarlet eyes. She looked at the light pillar that enveloped her and extended her hand. This thing, Flandrachon will be able to, before he could finish his words. The magic formation above Flandrachon's head suddenly rotated, and all the magic power within flowed into the transparent pillar of light. Whoosh! Under the infiltration of magic power, a water curtain suddenly descended from the surface of the transparent light pillar, turning the entire transparent light pillar into a cylindrical waterfall. Seeing this, Flandrachon's outstretched hand froze. Remilia, Patrice, and Zayi heaved sighs of relief. Remilia waved her hand disinterestedly at Zayi. Bring Flandrachon back to the basement. Yes, young mistress. Zayi bowed respectfully to Remilia before turning around and bowing to Flandrachon, who was trapped in the water curtain. My apologies, second young mistress. Zayi left this sentence and sauntered toward Flandrachon. Even though it was only an ordinary water curtain, Remilia, Patrice, and Zayi didn't doubt that it wouldn't be able to trap Flandrachon, who was at the 9th stage. Logically speaking, with Flandrachon's strength, she should be able to break through this ordinary water curtain in minutes. However, everyone relaxed their expressions. Chapter 1704. Be it Remilia or Flandrachon, both of them were vampires and possessed immense strength and special abilities that others could not hope to match. However, in terms of the bloodline of vampires, both of them were of the most ordinary type. Under such circumstances, Remilia and Flandrachon, as vampires, possessed immense strength and special abilities that others couldn't compare to, but they also retained the weakness of vampires. For example, fear of light, fear of water, and even fear of onions. Due to this weakness, whenever Flandrachon's mental state was unstable and she wanted to cause a ruckus, it was always Patrice who used water to trap Flandrachon, forcing her to obediently return to the basement. Therefore, this time, even though Flandrachon's ruckus left Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight at a loss, the three of them didn't doubt that Patrice's water curtain wouldn't be able to trap Flandrachon. Unfortunately, Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight were destined to be in for a shock. The three of them would never have thought that Flandrachon, who was still in the basement not long ago, had already been living in another world for quite some time when time in this world was frozen. When Ikaros was first summoned by Wu Yin and became Wu Yan summoned, the system gave Wu Yin the choice of removing the emotional seal on Ikaros in the original work. Just like Ikaros, when Flandrachon was summoned to the other world and became Wu Yan summoned, the system also pointed out the weakness in Flandrachon's bloodline and asked Wu Yin if he wanted to remove it. At that time, even though Wu Yin unintentionally summoned Flandrachon, he didn't intend for Flandrachon to have any weaknesses. Without hesitation, he ordered the system to remove all the weaknesses in Flandrachon's bloodline. In other words, Flandrachon is now a vampire. She no longer has any weaknesses that vampires have. Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight didn't know about this at all. Inside the water curtain, Flandrachon suddenly lowered her body, and Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight's expression changed greatly. She directly rushed out of the water curtain. Danger! Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight's pretty face turned pale. For Remilia and Flandrachon, water isn't fatal, but it's very dangerous. Once Remilia and Flandrachon came into contact with water, not only would they feel a sharp pain in the part of their body that came into contact with water, but they would also be soaked in too much water. In serious cases, their skin will even fester. The water curtain that trapped Flandrachon was like a waterfall, gushing down like a torrential waterfall. Flandrachon's skin would definitely fester and become unrecognizable if she were to fall into the water curtain like this. How can Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight not be shocked? However, what shocked the three of them even more was yet to come. Voila! With a clear splash, Flandrachon rushed out of the water curtain with her drenched body. Despite being drenched by the water, Flanderchan didn't seem to be affected by it at all. She dashed out of the water curtain and headed straight for the door. Remilia, Patchouli, and Night Eye widened their eyes in astonishment. While Remilia and the others were still in shock, Flanderchan turned into a streak of light and crashed into the heavy door with a loud boom. Bang! The door leading to the outer court of the Red Devil Mansion was immediately smashed into pieces of wood and scattered in all directions. Flanderchan dashed out of the Scarlet Devil Mansion as fast as she could without looking back. She dashed into the courtyard and soared into the sky under everyone's watchful eyes. What's going on? Remilia finally reacted. Her face was filled with shock. Flan, why isn't Flanderchan afraid of water? Neither Patrice nor Zankita could answer this question, because they didn't know why either. Of course, now wasn't the time to think about why Flanderchan wasn't afraid of water. Young mistress, Black Knight said anxiously. Second young mistress has escaped. Only then did Remilia recall this matter. Her expression instantly turned gloomy, and even Patrice muttered gravely. This time, it might be really serious. Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight's understanding of Flanderchan was still stuck in their memories. The three of them knew that Flanderchan's mental state was unstable. If she was allowed to wander around the fantasy village, she would definitely be in big trouble. After all, no matter if Flanderchan's mood was good or bad, she would want to play with people until they broke. Once she left the fantasy village, she might cause a massacre. This wasn't the most serious matter. The most serious matter was that if Flanderchan accidentally barged into the human realm, it would be really bad. Those who lived in the human realm were all weak and powerless humans. If Flanderchan went on a killing spree and killed everyone in the human realm, her life would be in danger. The human realm in the fantasy village is protected by Yakumo Sage Yakumo and Sumeru Boli Lingming. If Flanderchan went on a killing spree, the two wouldn't show her any mercy. At that time, Remilia would have to defend Flanderchan against the Demon Sage and Boli Shaman. Fighting against the Demon Sage, who was the creator of the fantasy village, and the Boli Witch, who protected the Boli Great Barrier in the fantasy village, meant that not only did the Red Fiend Hall have to fight against the entire fantasy village, they would also have no place to stay in the fantasy village. This isn't a joke. Thinking of this, the anxiety on Bouyer's face intensified. Patrice's charming face also became heavy. Remilia's emotions turned into fury. She roared at the maids hiding in the Scarlet Devil Mansion. What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and find the second young mistress. Yes. The maids responded in horror and ran out of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion to search for Flanderchan. Little devil. Patrice turned to the little devil beside her. Go find young mistress too. If you find her, come back and inform me. Got it, Madame Patrice. The little devil also ran out of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion and headed in a certain direction. Seeing the entire Scarlet Devil Mansion in less than 10 minutes, and facing such an embarrassing situation, Remilia nervously paced back and forth, and even Patrice remained silent. Roy, he couldn't help but feel a heavy feeling in his heart. Black Knight inadvertently glanced at the entrance of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion at the end of the courtyard and was slightly startled. A trace of anger surfaced on his face. With a flip of his hand, Black Knight grabbed a throwing knife and threw it out. Shing! The throwing knife transformed into a cold radiance that flashed through the air and ruthlessly pierced the head of a figure standing at the entrance of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion. Poochie! Along with a tearing sound, a blood-curdling scream, and a trace of blood splattered. The figure standing at the entrance collapsed to the ground. It was a tall girl with long red hair that reached her waist. Her hair was braided on both sides of her temples. Her braids were decorated with bows, and her chest was also decorated with a ribbon that looked like a bow. She was a tall girl. The young lady wore a dark green Chinese attire and a hat of the same color as her attire. The hat was engraved with a golden pentagram with the word dragon. She was dressed like a warrior. Black Knight couldn't help but feel angry as he gazed at the young lady on the ground. China, why didn't you stop the second young mistress? Whoa, The young lady called China pulled out the throwing knife from her head and looked at Black Knight weakly. But, Miss Black Knight, isn't my mission to guard the entrance? Guarding the entrance is not only for you to deal with intruders, but also to prevent people from casually entering and leaving the Scarlet Fiend Mansion. Black Knight angrily shouted. Your salary for the next 3 years will be deducted. If you don't find the second young mistress, you won't have a salary for the next 10 years. Yes, yes. The Chinese man immediately broke into a run. Just as he was about to run out, he suddenly seemed to remember something. He turned his head and spoke as if he was giving an order. By the way, Miss Black Knight, my name isn't China. I'm Hong Miling. Black Knight couldn't help but pull out another throwing knife, scaring Hong Miling and causing her to run away. Chapter 1705. Half an hour ago, when a system transferred Wu Yin, Flandre-chan, and Yu Kari to the Jinsokyo world, the world warped and Wu Yan's vision blurred. Wu Yin felt the soft body he was hugging lose its weight and disappear. Before he could react, the system's cold voice echoed in his mind. Beep. Detected that user has entered a dungeon. Beep. User has the right to choose the 4th phase of the Demigod Path mission. System has determined the current dungeon world user has entered, automatically generating the 4th phase of the Demigod Path mission. Beep. Extracting the current dungeon world information. Ding. Current dungeon world information collection complete. Beep. Automatically generating the 4th phase of the Demigod Path mission. Ding. Demigod Path mission has been generated. Ding. Demigod Path mission has been activated. Special mission, Demigod Path mission phase, 4th phase mission world, Fantasy Village mission details. Obtain Blood Essence with the power of Fantasy X1, Blood Essence with the power of State X1, Blood Essence with the power of Eternity X1, Blood Essence with the power of Nature X1, Blood Essence with the power of Time X1. Beep. This is the Demigod Path special mission. The original mission has been cancelled. User can only choose to leave the dungeon world after completing the 4th phase of the Demigod Path mission. Reminder, the time ratio between the dungeon world and the real world is 100. 1. User can train in the dungeon world without any worries. Have a good time. In less than 2 to 3 seconds, the system's voice rang again and again. The system's voice turned into the most basic of memories. The information and system's notifications were engraved into Wu Yan's mind like an implant. For a moment, Wu Yan felt a stabbing pain in his head. When the stabbing pain subsided, his blurry vision gradually returned to normal. The distorted world slowly returned to normal. However, the world that was imprinted into Wu Yan's vision, it was no longer the same world as before. In the first moment, he entered the other world. Before Wu Yan could get a clear look at the scene in front of him, a clear paw sound came from beneath his feet. At the same time, a crisp sound rang out. Wu Yan also felt it, on his own feet. It sank deeply into a groove. She felt her feet sink into a groove with a crisp sound. Wu Yan could not help but be stunned for a moment. He did not bother to observe where he was and subconsciously lowered his head. He looked at his feet. Then Wu Yan saw it. Under his feet, there was something that looked like a box. The lid of the box had been crushed by him, and one of his feet had sunk deep into the box. Not only did it crack the box, but it also broke through the bottom. Looking at the box that had basically turned into sawdust under his feet, Wu Yan was somewhat at a loss. What's going on? However, while Wu Yan was at a loss, in front of him, there was a figure that seemed to be entangled by a ferocious ghost. An extremely shrill scream resounded. No! In a shrill scream, Wu Yan was almost scared out of his wits. After quickly suppressing the faint instinct in his body, he raised his head and looked in front of him. It was not until then that Wu Yan saw the scene in front of him clearly. First, what was imprinted in Wu Yan's eyes was only a wooden building that seemed to have a bit of history. The building's area was not very vast. It was almost equivalent to the area of a family's house. There was not a single stone brick on the building. The entire building was made of wood, and the roof was made of rubble. In addition, whether it was the door, the windows, the corridor, or the floor, they were all made of wood. It was somewhat old and gave a rather historical feeling at a glance. This wooden building was an extremely typical shrine. At the entrance of the shrine, in front of the main gate, stood a young lady. In terms of appearance, she was definitely the top type of young lady. The young lady was about 16 or 17 years old. She had an extremely soft head of long black hair that was tied up with a huge bow on her head. The hair at her temples was also tied up with a hairband and fixed in front of her body. The young lady wore a costume that was very different from the traditional witch costume, but still had traces of the witch costume. However, unlike the traditional witch costume that was white at the top and red at the bottom, the young lady's witch costume was entirely red. Only the edges of the costume were white and pleated. It was extremely unique. Of course, the most unique thing about this witch costume was that not only did it reveal her shoulders, but it also revealed her armpits. It didn't seem to have any sleeves either. The girl was also wearing a pair of long glove-like sleeves and a necktie. With the addition of this unique witch costume, the young lady, who was originally very beautiful, was so beautiful that one could not bear to look away. It was a pity that such a perfect young lady in all aspects was currently holding her face with both hands. Her face was filled with despair, fear, and disbelief, as if she had encountered the end of the world. Boli Ling Ming, level 79. Seeing the young lady named Boli Ling Ming's expression as if she had encountered the end of the world, and her beautiful eyes stared straight at the crush box under her feet with a face full of despair, Wu Yin could not help but have a bad feeling in his heart. Boli Ling Ming? In that case, the young lady in front of him was the manager of the fantasy paradise, the witch in charge of guarding the Boli Great Barrier of the Boli Shrine? Then was he in the Boli Shrine now? Thinking up to here, then thinking of the original Boli Ling Ming's personality and his current situation, Wu Yin suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Boli Ling Ming was someone who was not interested in anything and was extremely indifferent to fame and fortune. She was even more pure than monks and nuns. If there was any personal temptation that Boli Ling Ming had, it would be that she was extremely greedy for money. Therefore, to Boli Ling Ming, the most important thing was undoubtedly money. And the most important thing was the money box that could help her collect incense money. Now, the extremely indifferent Boli Ling Ming looked at the crushed box under her feet with an expression of despair. Then, the broken box under my feet, could it be? Thinking of the possibility in his heart, Wu Yin suddenly became uneasy. On the other hand, Boli Ling Ming maintained the appearance of holding her face. The despair on her face slowly turned into absent-mindedness. Like a body that had lost its soul, she walked over shakily. Instinctively, Wu Yin retreated, trying not to agitate Boli Ling Ming as much as possible. He slowly retreated, allowing Boli Ling Ming to arrive in front of the pile of junk. Once she arrived in front of the pile of junk, Boli Ling Ming knelt on the ground with a pa sound. Her hands trembled as she picked up the junk on the ground, as if she was trying to put them back together, piling them up like building blocks. Of course, using such a method, it was impossible for the pile of junk to return to its original state. However, Boli Ling Ming was like a mental patient. With a dull face, she kept repeating her actions and muttering nervously, "Money box, my money box." As expected, to be able to agitate Boli Ling Ming to such an extent, that pile of junk could only be the money box of Boli's shrine. While Wu Yin couldn't help but ridicule her, he also felt a bit guilty when he saw Boli Ling Ming's panicked look. Although he felt that it was better not to agitate the other party, Wu Yin still chose to raise his hand and said weakly, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to money box. Boli Ling Ming did not pay attention to Wu Yin. She was still trying to piece the junk together, try to put her money box back together. Seeing this, Wu Yin became even more embarrassed. "Although I didn't mean to, it's just a money box. It shouldn't be a big problem, right? There's no money inside anyway, right?" Boli Ling Ming's hand that was piecing together the money box shook violently. She lowered her head, and her body began to emit black gas. Obviously, the biggest pain in Bo Li Ling Meng's heart was beautifully stabbed by Wu Yan. Chapter 1706. Bo Li Ling Meng felt that today was definitely the most nightmarish day of her life in the past 10 years. Originally, as the manager of Fantasy Village and the guardian of the Great Bo Li Barrier, as long as nothing major happened in Fantasy Village, Bo Li Ling Meng would live a leisurely life. Today was the same. After waking up early in the morning and eating breakfast, Bo Li Ling Meng picked up the broom in Bo Li Shrine and leisurely swept the shrine to pass the time. However, in less than 10 minutes, the broom in Bo Li Ling Meng's hand suddenly broke for no reason. At first, Bo Li Ling Meng didn't think much of it. She thought that the broom had been used for too long and was too old, so it had died of old age. She went to the storehouse to get some tools to fix the broom and then continued to clean the shrine. However, the broom in her hand broke again and again for more than 10 times. Bo Li Ling Meng also fixed the broom for more than 10 times before she finally felt that something was wrong. No matter how old the broom was, it shouldn't have broken so many times, right? As a shrine's witch, Bo Li Ling Meng should have some faith. Unfortunately, Bo Li Ling Meng didn't believe in any gods. However, it wasn't hard to understand why she would associate some bad things with gods and supernatural forces. Because of this, Bo Li Ling Meng felt that her broom had been broken so many times. Could this be a bad omen? When the broom in her hand finally broke for the 11th time, Bo Li Ling Meng believed it. Today, something unfortunate will definitely happen. When this thought rose in Bo Li Ling Meng's mind, outside the shrine, a crisp shattering sound echoed in the silent space and entered Bo Li Ling Meng's ears. Hearing that crisp shattering sound, Bo Li Ling Meng's hand trembled. After shouting in her heart, she rushed out of the shrine and forcefully opened the shrine's door. Then, Bo Li Ling Meng saw a scene that was like a nightmare to her. Her most precious money box, by a man who didn't even look at it, stepped on it, and it was the kind that was stepped on to pieces. Not only did he crush her, but he had also stepped on that strange man when she was heartbroken. He even mentioned the most painful truth for Bo Li and Ling Meng. This made Bo Li Ling Meng's heart go crazy. Could it be? Do I need you to remind me that no one comes to the Bori Shrine to worship, so the money box is empty all day long? On the other side, Ling Meng lowered her head as she looked at Bo Li. Wu Yan's heart began to beat faster when he saw the black qi all over his body. Don't think that Bo Li Ling Meng was weak just because she was only level 79, the pinnacle of Tier 8. She was definitely the most invincible existence in Fantasy Village. This was not a joke. It was the truth. As the name implied, as the manager of the Fantasy Village and the protector of the Great Bali Barrier, Bo Li Ling Meng was invincible in the Fantasy Village, or more accurately, in the Great Bali Barrier, as long as she was within the range of the Bori Great Barrier. Bo Li Ling Meng would enter an extremely magical state. If others attacked her, they would not be able to hit her at all. However, when she attacked others, not only would she be able to hit them, she could even increase the power of her attacks when necessary. Not only that, Bo Li Ling Meng also had an ability called God's Possession. She could use the same method as Spirit Descent to invite a god to possess her and display unimaginable combat strength. In other words, in Fantasy Village, not only would Bo Li Ling Meng not be injured, she could even cheat when necessary. Against such an opponent, even Violet, the creator of Fantasy Village, would not be able to do anything to her. Therefore, angering Bo Li Ling Meng in Fantasy Village was definitely a very irrational thing to do. This shameless red and white, which would not fly into a rage out of humiliation and directly go berserk, right? The more he thought about it, the more Wu Yan felt that it was possible. In order to not cause any trouble, Wu Yan sighed. Well, it is indeed my fault that I stepped on your things. Don't worry, I will be responsible for repairing them. When such a sentence came out, the black gas on Bo Li Ling Meng's body stagnated as if it did not exist in the first place and retreated back into Bo Li Ling Meng's body. Then, Bo Li Ling Meng raised her head and looked at Wu Yan with a doubtful gaze. Really? Seeing Bo Li Ling Meng's doubtful expression, Wu Yin could not help but roll his eyes. It's just a money box. Do I have to lie to you? What do you mean by just a money box? Bo Li Ling Meng raised her eyebrows. That is the most important godly item in the Bori Shrine. Godly item? If I could stuff myself full of money every day, then it would be a godly item, but wouldn't it be empty all day? More like trash, right? Resisting the urge to complain, Wu Yin was too lazy to bother with Bo Li Ling Meng's correction. He walked in front of Bo Li Ling Meng and half knelt down. He stretched out a hand and pressed it on the pile of broken wood. The next moment, mana gushed out. Wu Yin opened his mouth slightly and uttered a couple of incantations that turned the mana into a substantial form. That's how it worked. Under Bo Li Ling Meng's gaze, the broken money box trembled, and as if time was flowing backwards, it pieced itself back together bit by bit. Finally, it was restored to its original state. Wah! Seeing her money box restored to its original state, Bo Li Ling Meng's eyes lit up. Without caring about her image, she hugged the box that was half the size of her body. It's really fixed. Looking at how Bori and Ray Meng are rubbing against his money box like it's a treasure, Wu Yin dryly laughed and choked on his words. At this moment, Bo Li Ling Meng rubbed her money box while speaking to Wu Yin with a face full of joy. I thought you were a human who was lost from the outside world. I didn't expect you to be a mage. Although Fantasy Village could not be said to be a separate world and was still connected to the real world, due to the existence of the Bo Li barrier and the realm of illusion and reality, it could be said to be isolated from the real world. The only point of intersection between Fantasy Village and the real world was this Bo Li shrine. In a certain place in the real world, there was also a Bo Li shrine. It was the same existence as the Bo Li shrine in Fantasy Village. Just like two sides of water, they were reflections of each other. If someone in the real world accidentally passed through the barrier of the Fantasy Village through the Bori Shrine outside, then they would arrive at the Bori Shrine in the Fantasy Village. Of course, not everyone could pass through the enchantment of the Fantasy Village. Those who could pass through the enchantment of the Fantasy Village and come to the Fantasy Village either had some special place or had been forgotten by the people in the real world and lost in here. As the manager of Fantasy Village, Bo Li Ling Meng could not say that she knew everyone in Fantasy Village, but she could more or less tell if someone was from Fantasy Village from their aura. That was why she said that Wu Yin was lost in Fantasy Village. After all, Bo Li Ling Meng could not feel the aura of someone who lived in Fantasy Village from Wu Yin. As for the mage that Bo Li Ling Meng mentioned, it was a magician. In Fantasy Village, there was no difference between magic and magic. As long as magic was used to create miracles, it was called magic. As for the existence that used magic, it was called a mage. Mage? Wu Yin scratched his cheek. Well, it doesn't matter if you think so. Hearing Wu Yan's perfunctory explanation, Bo Li Ling Meng glanced at him and did not ask further. She looked like she found it troublesome. I don't care if you're a human or a mage, since you're in Fantasy Village. As the manager of Fantasy Village, you should answer a few of my questions. Otherwise, if you get into trouble in the future, I'll be the one in trouble. All right. Wu Yin bitterly smiled. Although I can't guarantee that I can answer all your questions, I'll listen. You're quite arrogant, outsider. Bo Li Ling Meng curled her lips and stood up. She patted the dust off her knees and turned around to face Wu Yin. Then, tell me, what's your name? Name? Wu Yin blinked and rolled his eyes. He seemed to have thought of something, and a strange smile appeared on his face. However, it quickly disappeared. Ahem. Wu Yin pretended to be serious and coughed. He looked at Bo Li Ling Meng and smiled. Nice to meet you. I'm Bai Yun Bai, the head of Bai Yun clan from the House of the Lost. Chapter 1707. Nice to meet you. My name is Yakumo Bai, the head of the House of the Lost. Yakumo Bai? When these words came out of the man's mouth, it was no surprise that Bo Li Ling Meng was stunned. It took her a long time to recover and reply in astonishment. Huh? Ma, I said I am the head of the House of the Lost, Yakumo, but you don't have to be so reserved. Wu Yin rubbed his head in embarrassment as if he's a noble trying to soothe a country bumpkin. Just treat me like an ordinary person. Just call me by. Bori Lingming's eyes twitched. She took a deep breath and looked at Wu Yin with a sinister gaze. Are you kidding me? Kidding? Wu Yin asked innocently. Why do you say that? I don't know how you know about the House of the Lost, and I don't know how you know the surname Yakumo, but I don't feel the aura of someone who lived in the fantasy village. So, you're from the outside world. Bori Lingming said with displeasure. There's no way I wouldn't know about you in the House of the Lost. You don't think I'm that gullible, do you? I didn't lie to you. Wu Yin sighed with an innocent expression. If you don't believe me, you can ask Yukari. My relationship with Yukari isn't shallow. This time, Bori Lingming was confused. It was just as Bori Lingming said. If the House of the Lost had someone with the surname Yakumo, it's impossible for Yukari to not know. After all, the relationship between the Bori Shrine and the House of the Lost was not shallow. One was the manager of the fantasy village. The other was the creator of the fantasy village. Bori Lingming and Yukari's relationship wasn't simple. If this Yakumo was really from the House of the Lost, Yukari wouldn't hide it from Bori Lingming. However, this person who didn't have the aura of someone who lived in the fantasy village knew about the House of the Lost and said the name Yukari. It was obvious that he wasn't an outsider. Could it be that she was mistaken? Bori Lingming knocked on her head in distress. She suddenly realized something and stared at Wu Yin. Even if you're from the House of the Lost, the head, do you think I'll believe you? House of the Lost. Yakumo. To put it bluntly, it was just the place where Z lived. In other words, the House of the Lost. Yukari is the real master. Being the head of the House of the Lost was just a bunch of nonsense. Wu Yin seemed to have expected such a question from Bori Raimu. He grinned in response. It's natural for you to find it strange, but I am indeed the head of the House of the Lost. To be precise, I should be the future head of the House of the Lost. Because Wu Yin grinned at Boli Lingming. What he said made Boli Lingming flabbergasted. Purple is my fiancé. What did you say? Boli Lingming cried out. Yukari is your fiancé? That's it. Wu Yin humbly told Bori Lingming. Please take care of my House of the Lost in the future. This is definitely a joke. Boli Lingming seemed to have suffered a blow. She took 2 steps back and loudly shouted. How could anyone want that moldy old hag? Just as he said that, a black crack filled with eyeballs appeared above the shrine. Before Wu Yin and Lingming could react, a black beam of light shot out. The black beam of light fell straight down. Wu Yin and Lingming only saw a blur in front of their eyes. The black beam of light landed on the recently repaired cash box. Pum! The black beam of light blasted the cash box that Lingming treated as her life into powder. Not even a piece of wood was left as it dissipated with the wind. Ah! Boli Lingming stared blankly at the original spot where the money box had been. Looking at the empty spot, not even a single piece of wood was left behind. She once again let out a desperate scream. My cash box! Amidst her sorrowful cries, Boli Lingming threw herself onto the ground where the money box had originally been. It was as if the money box had not disappeared, but had instead become invisible. Her delicate hands groped around the box. But of course, she could not find anything. It's gone. It's really gone. Tears gushed out of Bori Ray's eyes. She raised her head and looked at the gap in the sky above the Bori shrine as she screamed in rage. Yukari, come out! Lingming yelled. Yukari did not come out of the crack. Instead, the crack closed and disappeared. Seeing this, Bori Lingming was so angry that she wanted to die, but she couldn't do anything about it. Wu Yin, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. Flandre-chan and Yukari were not by his side when he first arrived at the fantasy village. Wu Yin was worried that something might have happened to them. Now, it seems like Yukari and Flandre-chan have returned to the place where they were before they became Wu Yan summons. Yukari, that be asterisk starred. Wu Yin grumbled as he looked at the empty sky. Since you've been paying attention to this place, you should at least come out and show your face. You made me worry for nothing. That's right. Tell her to come out. Bori Lingming leapt up from the ground and arrived in front of Wu Yan. She grabbed Wu Yan by the collar and started shaking him. Tell her to come out. Tell her to come out. With Yukari's personality, she won't come out even if you yell your lungs out. Wu Yan felt dizzy. If you want to see Yukari, why don't you go to the House of the Lost and look for her yourself? If I can find the House of the Lost, why would I need you to tell her to come out? Ling Ming hissed. In the fantasy village, everyone only knows about the existence of the House of the Lost, but no one knows its exact location. Oh, Wu Yan asked curiously. He really didn't know about it. Even you don't know? On the surface, the relationship between Yukari and Raydream seemed to be very bad. But seriously speaking, not only did the two manage the fantasy village together, but as the shaman of the Ray Shrine, Raydream definitely had a closer relationship with Yukari than others. Does that mean Ling Ming doesn't know where the House of the Lost is? Every time Violet invited someone to the House of the Lost, she would directly use her ability to bring them there. I'm afraid only Yu Yuzi knows the real location of the House of the Lost. Bo Li's spirit dream grimaced. Aren't you the head of the House of the Lost? Don't tell me you don't know where your house is. Wu Yan chuckled. You're right. I really don't know where the House of the Lost is. You. Ling Ming's hands trembled as she clenched her fist. She didn't hit Wu Yan's head with it. Instead, she let go of Wu Yan's collar. Forget it. If that's the case, you'll have to fix my money box again. I can't do it this time. Wu Yan raised his hands in surrender. If there's any remains, it won't be hard to fix it. But now, the money box has completely evaporated. There's not even a speck of dust left. I don't care. Boli Ling Ming clearly intended to be shameless. If you can't fix it, you'll have to make me a new one. Wu Yan flinched at her words. Why? This time, it wasn't me who broke your money box. Aren't you the head of the House of the Lost? Aren't you Yukari's fiancé? Boli Ling Ming waved her hand impatiently. If that's the case, Yukari broke my things. Don't you have to take responsibility? This time, Wu Yan was speechless. Hurry up and finish my money box. Boli Ling Ming lightly snorted. Otherwise, when people come to pay their respects, what if they don't see the money box and think they don't have to donate anymore? Don't worry, Wu Yan complained. No one will come to pay their respects. What did you say? Nothing, then hurry up and do it. Boli Ling Ming turned around and walked into her shrine without looking back. As she walked, she muttered to herself, Yukari, she really has a fiancé. Since that gap appeared, it means that Yukari has been paying attention to the situation here. Since Yukari didn't come out to deny it, it means that she admitted it. Ling Ming could only choose to believe it. Chapter 1708. In one of the areas of the fantasy village, there was an antique village, the human realm. In a fantasy village, there were all kinds of non-human creatures such as monsters, fairies, and demon spirits. Even the gods lived in it. Although there were also humans, compared to those non-human creatures, humans were a weaker race. Unlike the non-human creatures who were born with a certain amount of power, or even a huge amount of power, humans were born with no advantages. If there was nothing special, they would not have any power at all. However, monsters, fairies, demon spirits, and so on were all races that would attack humans, devour them, and feed on them. This caused the humans living in the fantasy village to not only have a very low status, but it was also accompanied by danger everywhere. The human realm was the main settlement of the humans in the fantasy village. In addition to humans, there were also a few monsters and other races living here. The non-human races living in the human realm generally had no hostility to humans and would not attack them. Therefore, there were not many monsters living in the human realm, but it was very common for monsters to come to the human realm to do things. Because the human realm was the only place in the fantasy village that could be called a normal place. The humans living here would not only open all kinds of shops to make a living, but some obedient monsters would also open shops here. There were also school buildings that specialized in teaching human children to read. It was just like an ordinary village. It was very peaceful. The daily necessities that humans needed could be bought here. The things that monsters and other non-human creatures needed could also be found here. Some shops would be open until late at night and become exclusive shops for monsters, so that the monsters who were active at night could be active during that time. So, during normal times, even the monsters and other races outside the human realm would come to the human realm to shop. In addition, there were people who specialized in repelling monsters living in the human realm. Bowley Witch and a monster sage would also protect the human realm from behind. If one lived in the human realm, it was very safe and wouldn't be attacked by life forms of other races. Of course, it was another story if one went out. At this time, it was morning. There was still some time before noon, but the mortal world was very lively. Many people came to buy groceries for lunch, shuttling back and forth on the streets. Some monsters also mingled in the crowd, patronizing some shops. The entire human realm was like an ancient market, bustling with noise and excitement. On this bustling street, there were many people. Amidst the flow of people, a cute little girl also came here. As she walked, she sucked on her finger and looked left and right as if she had no relatives. The newcomer. It was Flanderchan who had escaped from the Scarlet Devil Mansion. After escaping from the Scarlet Devil Mansion, Flanderchan flew at her fastest speed and ended up in the human world. Originally, Flanderchan had been locked up in the basement by Remilia for 495 years. Other than the Scarlet Devil Mansion, basically, he had never taken a single step outside. Under such circumstances, Flanderchan really wanted to find Wu Yin, but she didn't know where to look. She could only choose a random direction and search aimlessly. The reason she stopped at the human realm was because it was very lively. Not only did it attract Flanderchan's attention, but it also made Flanderchan think that her brother might be here as well. And so, Flanderchan began to wander around the human realm. Of course, she was also aimless. Looking at the owners of the surrounding shops shouting and observing the people who walked past them, Zhang Xian thought to himself, "What a pity." Flanderchan carefully avoided the crowd while sucking on her finger like a lost child, mumbling pitifully, "Big brother, where are you?" On the street, many people noticed this unusually cute little girl who was dressed differently and had a pair of broken crystal wings on her back. They all felt that she seemed to be lost and hesitated whether they should go up and ask her about it. But in the midst of hesitation, no one chose to approach her. It wasn't that the humans in Fantasy Village were all cold and indifferent. It was just that this little girl with broken wings and a crystal was obviously not a human. Moreover, she had never shown her face in the human realm before. Facing such an unknown existence who might be a monster, no matter how cute she was, no one dared to approach her recklessly. Who knows, maybe she hates humans and doesn't want to interact with them. If she approached, she might be attacked. Under the gazes of many passers-by, Flanderchan sucked on her finger and looked around. But not long after, Flanderchan stopped in her tracks and fixed her gaze on a shop in front of her. It was a shop selling baked bread. Looking at the piping hot baked bread, Flanderchan couldn't help but cover her stomach, feeling a little hungry. Ugh. Flanderchan was in a dilemma. Big brother. She wanted to continue looking for her brother, but she also wanted to buy something to eat. For Flanderchan, this small conflict was enough to make her feel a little troubled. But in the end, Flanderchan couldn't overcome her desire for the baked bread. She walked to the front of the shop and stared at the baked bread. Little girl. The shop owner seemed to have noticed Flanderchan standing in front of the shop. He hesitated for a moment before choosing to approach her and asked carefully, "Do you want to eat a baked bread?" Flanderchan looked up. Her cute big eyes looked at the shop owner, who was at least 10 years old, and nodded. Flanderchan is hungry. Seeing that this non-human little girl didn't seem to reject humans, the shop owner heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on his face. Then, "Do you want to buy a baked bread?" "Yes." Flanderchan nodded without hesitation. Her adorable look made the shop owner's face soften despite knowing that she wasn't human. "All right, one baked bread." The shop owner grabbed a piping hot baked bread and stuffed it into a paper bag that could only hold half of it before passing it to Flanderchan. "Thank you for your patronage." Flanderchan smiled happily, just as she was about to reach out for the baked bread. An anxious voice sounded behind her. Flan. Hearing the voice, Flandre-chan's happy smile instantly crumbled. She turned her head around indignantly and looked towards the source of the voice. Not far away, on the other side of the street, two figures were standing there. One was a petite girl about the same height as Flandre-chan. The other was a silver-haired maid holding a parasol for the petite girl. The other was a frail girl dressed like pajamas. She was panting slightly. They were Remilia, Lai, and Patrice. Flan. Remilia's anxious expression softened when she saw Flandre-chan standing in front of shop. She was about to reach out for a biscuit when she saw Flandre-chan. Instead, she was filled with anger. I finally found you. Little sister. Patrice calmed her rapid heartbeat and breathing. She was surprised to see Flandre-chan standing on the street. Not only are you not afraid of water, you're not even afraid of sunlight? Second miss. Lai said worriedly. Why don't you come over and let me hold a parasol for you? I don't need it. Flandre-chan said angrily. Big sister, how did you find this place? A fairy reported that she saw you enter the human realm, so we rushed over. Patrice explained. Little sister, Remy was very worried about you. She didn't even care about the sun outside and insisted on coming out to find you. Hearing this, the anger on Fran's face dissipated. She looked at Remilia, who was cowering under the parasol, and lowered her head. Big sister is such an idiot. You're the idiot. You almost caused the entire Scarlet Devil Mansion to collapse. Remilia shouted. Hurry up and come home with us. Flan won't compromise on this. Flandre-chan stubbornly said. Big sister is a bad person. Why did you have to lock Flandre-chan in the basement? Isn't that because you're always causing trouble? Remilia said irritably. Do you want to keep causing trouble for Big Sister? Of course not, Flandre-chan retorted. Then, Big Sister, do you think Flandre-chan is causing trouble for Big Sister? Remilia, Patrice, and Lai were all speechless. Chapter 1709. At this moment, Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight finally calmed down after Flandre-chan broke out of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion. Questions arose in their minds one after another. The first question was, of course, the reason why Flandre-chan wasn't afraid of water or sunlight. As a vampire, Flandre-chan's strength was above Remilia's. However, in terms of vampire bloodline, both of them weren't that far apart. Logically speaking, since Remilia was afraid of water and sunlight, Flandre-chan should be the same. That was why whenever Flandre-chan caused trouble and tried to break out of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion, Patrice would cast a spell to make it rain outside the mansion and force Flandre-chan back. This method had clearly worked the last time, but this time, it had suddenly lost its effect. How could Remilia and the others not be puzzled, surprised, or even shocked? The second question was, of course, Flandre-chan's current state. Even though it didn't sound nice, Flandre-chan had been in a crazy state ever since she was born. She basically didn't stop and wanted to find someone to play with her all day long. However, she didn't know the key point, and the more she played, the crazier she got. In the end, those who played with Flandre-chan were all smashed into pieces. Even the items in the surroundings were affected. Flandre-chan, who had gone crazy from playing, destroyed everything. It was because of this that Remilia had no choice but to lock Flandre-chan up in the basement. But this time, Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight were shocked to discover that the trace of craziness in Flandre-chan's beautiful wine-red eyes was gone. Moreover, in the human world, in a place where there were so many people around, Flandre-chan wasn't like before. Every time she met someone, she would crazily ask them to play with her and play with them until they broke. She even blended into the crowd like an ordinary child. There wasn't the slightest feeling of being out of place. Remilia, Patrice, and Black Knight, who thought that Flandre-chan would start a massacre upon encountering strangers, looked at each other in dismay. It had been a while since they last saw Flandre-chan. Actually, it hadn't been that long. But the last time they met, Flandre-chan was still as crazy as ever. She would even throw a tantrum every now and then. Why did she change so much this time? Flandre-chan wasn't afraid of water or light. She was as normal as a child now. Could it be that something had happened to Flandre during the time she was in the basement that changed her? Could it be that Flandre wasn't crazy anymore? Ramilia couldn't help but feel a little excited. If Flandre was really like a normal person, then wouldn't the two sisters be able to live a good life together and not have to imprison her? Zui seemed to have thought of the same thing, and a trace of surprise appeared on her pretty face. Patrice was the only one who remained calm. She looked at Flandre and probed. "Sister, don't you want to find someone to play with you?" Ramilia and Lei couldn't help but hold their breaths. Play? Flandre eyes lit up. She seemed to be tempted. But when she remembered that she had other matters to attend to, she withered away like a frosted eggplant. Flan wants to play too, but I have to find my brother. Brother? This time, Ramilia, Patrice, and Nightai were stunned. Brother? Since when did Flandre have a brother? The shop owner who was holding a sesame seed cake was troubled. Sesame seed cake, do you want more? Yes. Flandre replied without hesitation. She took the biscuit from the shopkeeper's hands with a bright smile. Then, as if she had thought of something, she rummaged through her clothes and took out a gold coin. Here's the money. With that, Flandre slammed the gold coin on the counter in front of the shopkeeper, leaving the shopkeeper dumbfounded. Not to mention the shop owner. Even Ramilia, Patrice, and Midnight were dumbfounded. A gold coin? Why would Flandre have a gold coin? No, that's not right. When did Flandre learn how to buy things and know that she has to pay for things? That little girl. The shop owner didn't know that the cute little girl in front of him was once a killer fiend. He picked up the gold coin on the counter and handed it to Flandre with fear and trepidation. This amount is too big. I don't have any spare change for you. It wasn't just big. With this one gold coin, even if it wasn't enough to buy the shop, it would definitely be more than enough to buy him a month's worth of sesame seed cakes. With a small business like the Sesame Seed Cake Shop, how could they find any extra money? Flandre blinked her eyes. She looked at the sesame seed cake in her hand with reluctance. But Flandre only has a gold coin, and I'm hungry this. The shopkeeper's face was filled with embarrassment. After a long time, he sighed. Forget it. This sesame seed cake is a gift for you, little girl. Really? Flandre looked like a blossoming flower with a happy smile on her face. Thank you. Huh? Seeing how happy Flandre is, the shopkeeper also laughed. Flandre picked up the gold coin and sneaked a glance at Ramilia, Patrice, and Dark Knight. Then, she turned around and ran away like a wisp of smoke. Fran! Ramilia was shocked. Chase after him. Ramilia, Patrice, and Little Knight also ran after Flandre. Fran, stop right there. It was Ramilia's exasperated yell that sounded like she was going crazy. Sister, go back quickly. Flandre yelled without even turning her head. Second miss, please stop. While carefully holding an umbrella for Ramilia, she ran in small steps to match her young Miss footsteps. No way. Flandre started to bite the sesame seed cake in her hand, but she still insisted on running away. Sister, 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 milady. It was Patrice who had a weak body and suffered from asthma. She had been squatting at home all this while, and her stamina was starting to weaken. Patrice, you better go back quickly. Flandre turned around and stuck out her tongue at Ramilia, Patrice, and Dark Knight while making a face. Just like that, four beautiful girls, big and small, were engaged in a chase on a street in the land of the living. Along the way, Flandre bell-like laughter, Ramilia's exasperated yell, Dark Knight's anxious and worried call, and Patrice's increasingly hurried breathing mixed together and attracted the attention of many. This state lasted for roughly 5 minutes before the sickly Patrice couldn't hold on any longer. Her legs went soft, and she fell forward. Smack! MQ. With a crisp sound, Patrice uttered an extremely adorable word and wailed miserably as she smashed onto the ground. Patrice! Lord Patrice! Ramilia and Zui immediately cried out in alarm and stopped their footsteps. I. Patrice, who was lying on the ground with her face on the ground, raised her trembling hand. After stammering out those words, Patrice's hand fell down as though she had fainted and didn't move an inch. Patrice, Lord Patrice. Remilia and Dark Knight's sorrowful cries echoed through the streets. Wah! Flanderchan was chewing on a sesame seed cake in front of him. She exclaimed as she chewed. Flan seems to have gone overboard with her play. Flan. Remilia was furious at Flanderchan's words. If you continue to fool around, Big Sister will really be angry. Flan isn't afraid. Flanderchan snorted. Even if Big Sister is angry, Flan will still look for Big Brother. What Big Brother? Remilia shouted. When did you have a Big Brother? Why don't I know about it? Flanderchan's expression froze, and her expression turned gloomy. Of course Big Sister doesn't know. Big Sister never cared about Flan, who stayed in the basement. Remilia opened her mouth and looked at Flanderchan's gloomy expression. Guilt welled up in her heart, and she couldn't say anything else. Flanderchan composed herself and said angrily to Remilia, Anyway, Flan won't go back before finding Big Brother. Remilia, Dark Knight, and Patrice, who was lying on the ground, felt a headache coming on. What should they do? Chapter 1710. What a scam. In the wooden corridor of a warehouse on the west side of the Bori Shrine, a man with black hair and red eyes held a hammer in his hand. He looked at the sky and sighed, but at the same time, he swiftly nailed a few pieces of wood together with nails to make a money box. I didn't expect that today I would pick up a hammer and work as a carpenter. If the people in the Spalier world knew that a peak Rang 9 powerhouse who was about to ascend to the demigod level was working as a carpenter with a hammer, they would definitely be shocked. However, there was no other way. Bori Dream's money box had been completely destroyed. It was impossible to repair it with magic. If he wanted a money box, he would have to make something out of nothing. It was not that Wu Yin didn't know how to do magic of this level. Just like Blackie in the world of magical girl Ilya, didn't she know how to use class cards and projection magic to create something out of nothing? There were also magic similar to projection magic in the 103,000 magic books. Due to his personal issues, he couldn't create a noble artifact using that kind of magic. However, creating a money box is just a matter of time. However, just like the projection magic, this type of magic that was created out of nothing had the biggest drawback. That was, once the mana used to create an item was exhausted, the created item would also disappear. Wu Yin didn't want to keep replenishing mana just to maintain the existence of a money box. Therefore, he could only do it himself. He had enough food and clothing. As expected, common sense is the most useless thing in Jinjutsu. Holding a hammer, Wu Yin hammered on the money box that was slowly taking shape in front of him. Wu Yin had a conflicted expression on his face. That red-white, even the fiancé of the creator of Fantasy Village could be ordered to do this kind of thing. Who would have thought of this if it was somewhere else? Of course, he kept complaining, but in his heart, Wu Yin never thought that this kind of situation would be degrading just because he had some strength. He was just complaining casually. His consciousness took advantage of this moment to sink into the content of the 4th round of his Demigod Path mission. Special mission, Demigod Path mission chain. 4th mission world. Fantasy Village mission details. Obtain Blood Essence with Fantasy Power X1. Blood Essence with State Power X1. Blood Essence with Eternal Power X1. Blood Essence with Nature Power X1. Blood Essence with Time Power X1. After confirming the content of his 4th mission Demigod Path, Wu Yin frowned. Blood Essence? This was easy to understand. It was just extracted from the human body. Blood without any impurities. Blood Essence containing Fantasy Power. Blood Essence containing Realm Power's Realm Power. Blood Essence containing Eternal Power. Blood Essence containing Nature Power. Blood Essence containing Time Power. There were a total of 5 types of Blood Essence. If he found all of them, Wu Yin will be able to complete the 4th segment of the Demigod Path quest. But where should he find these Blood Essence? Blood Essence that contains the power of one's realm? That should be referring to Purple's Blood Essence that had the ability to control realms, right? Then, The other four types should refer to the blood essence of those who had the corresponding abilities. Blood essence containing fantasy power referred to the blood essence of those who had the ability related to fantasy. Blood essence containing eternal power referred to the blood essence of those who had the ability related to eternity. Blood essence containing nature power referred to the blood essence of those who had the ability related to nature. Blood essence containing time power referred to the blood essence of those who had the ability related to time. In other words, all he needed to do was to find existences with abilities related to fantasy, realm, eternity, nature, and time, and obtain their blood to complete the fourth round of the Demigod Path mission. Fantasy, realm, eternity, nature, time. Wu Yin swung the hammer in a daze as he hammered away at the money-stuffing box. If it's realm, it must be Z. In the fantasy village, no one else has the ability related to realm except for Z. I more or less know about eternity and time. If it's nature, it should be that person. But who is this fantasy? While mulling over the background of the person he's looking for, Wu Yin also completed the money box in his hand. Bang, bang, bang. That's it. Wu Yin hit the money box a few more times before he put down the hammer in satisfaction. He patted the box that was almost the same as the one he destroyed, but it was much bigger. Hurry up and give this to that shameless red-white. Then go and get a drop of blood from Violet. If I'm not wrong, Violet should be in the House of the Lost. That's where she was before I summoned her. Wu Yan's face froze at the end of his sentence. The place where Violet was before she was summoned by Meng-Chi? Flandre Chan should be in the same place, right? Is there any other place where Flandre Chan was before she was summoned? The basement of Scarlet Fiend Mansion. It was a place that left Flandre Chan with endless trauma and hatred. Given how much Flandre Chan hated the basement of the Scarlet Fiend Mansion, if she had returned to the basement the moment she returned to Fantasy Village, she would either be hiding there helplessly or she would have already caused a ruckus in the Scarlet Fiend Mansion. Wu Yin couldn't sit still any longer. He stood up and he rushed toward the shrine. When he arrived at the entrance of the shrine, he pushed the door open and he shouted without hesitation. Red-white. Boli Ling Meng, who was leisurely sitting in front of a table and drinking tea, was startled by the sudden cry. A mouthful of scalding hot tea smoothly slid down her throat, causing her eyes to widen in shock. Wah! Immediately, Boli Ling Meng jumped up from the ground and ran around the shrine. Tears flowed down her face as she fanned her tongue with all her might. Water! 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 Seeing the chaotic scene, Wu Yin raised his hand and he channeled his magic power into it. At the next moment, an azure magical ritual appeared above Bori Lingming's head. It spun and a waterfall of water poured down like rain. Splash! Amidst the splashing sound of water, Boli Lingming's entire body was drenched by the water from the sky. She instantly turned into a drowned rat. Drip! Water droplets slid down from Boli Lingming's body and dripped onto the soaked floor. Boli Lingming's robe clung tightly to her body, revealing the curves of her delicate body. Bori Lingming's tongue seems to have cooled down, but she didn't look happy at all. She stared at Wu Yin, who is standing at the door, like she wants to poke a hole in his body with her gaze. The look in her eyes is extremely dangerous. Ha! Wu Yin smiled bitterly under Bori Lingming's murderous gaze. You asked for water, so I gave you water. Thank you so much. Maybe it's too much of a hassle, so Ling Ming glanced at Wu Yin. She grabbed her skirt and started twirling the water. Wu Yin couldn't help but look at Boli Ling Ming's skirt that hiked up to her knees, looking at her fair thighs. Wu Yin retracted his gaze after a quick glance, and he asked Ling Ming instead. Red-white, where is Red Devil Mansion? My name is not Red-white. My name is Ling Ming. Bori Ling Ming glared at Wu Yin. Red Devil Mansion? Why are you looking for Red Devil Mansion? I don't have time to explain. Tell me the location first. Wu Yin raised his voice. Otherwise, if things get out of hand, as the manager of Fantasy Town, you won't be able to relax. Things get out of hand? Boli Ling Ming's brows furrowed as well. What are you talking about? Didn't I tell you to tell me the location first? Anxious, Wu Yin jumped in front of Bori Lingming and grabbed her shoulder. Hurry up and tell me the location of Red Devil Mansion. Let me go. Bori Lingming's body trembled as it was the first time she was touched by someone of the opposite sex. An unnatural expression appeared on her face as she struggled. In the end, as she struggled, Bori Lingming was hit by the water dripping from her body. She let out a cry of surprise as she fell forward. Chapter 17:11. In the air not far from the Bori Shrine, a figure is flying towards the Bori Shrine at a leisurely pace. However, rather than saying that it is a figure flying towards the Bori Shrine, it would be more accurate to say that it is a figure riding on a broom, like a witch, using the broom to fly towards the Bori Shrine. The one riding on the broom is a girl dressed as a witch, but she looks neither fish nor fowl. She had curly blonde hair that reached her waist and fluttered in the wind. There was a braid at the front of her bangs that hung in front of her body. There was a bow ornament on the braid that swayed along with her long hair. The young lady was dressed in a standard black sorceress outfit, but she had a white half-apron on the outside. She wore a wide black, triangular sorcerer hat on her head. The hat was decorated with a large butterfly knot, and the color of the butterfly knot was white. This is a girl that is very similar to Bori Lingming in all aspects. Bori Lingming's entire body, aside from her hair, was only red and white. This young girl's entire body, aside from her hair, was only black and white. In fact, this girl is also called this by others. Unfortunate Black and White. Original name, Misty Rain Devil Lisa. In a fantasy land where monsters are everywhere and gods are also present, Misty Rain Devil Lisa is an extremely rare human who has the power to rival monsters. Her job is a mage. Moreover, she is also a human who is bored to death all day long and wants to find a person or monster to fight. She is a very lively human. It's so boring. Isn't there anything interesting happening? Riding on the broom like a witch, Misty Rain Devil Lisa flies towards the Bori Shrine while faintly sighing. For example, mutation or something. Mutation. That refers to something that can cause the fantasy land to fall into an abnormal state. It is a strange phenomenon caused by a certain existence or a certain number of existences. These strange phenomena that can cause the fantasy land to fall into an abnormal state, whether it is man-made or because of the environment, are all collectively known as mutation. And to solve the mutation, it is the manager of the fantasy land. It is the job of the witch of the Bori Shrine. This black and white witch who is currently flying toward the Bori Shrine can also be considered an expert in solving mutations. Of course, the so-called expert in solving mutations is just because Misty Rain Devil Lisa is too bored. Every time there is a mutation, she will eagerly follow behind Bori Lingming. She is even more active than Bori Lingming in solving the mutation, thus obtaining the title. This is a person who really wants to kill time and wants to see the world in chaos. Bori Lingming, who is greedy for small gains and money, but is also abnormally lazy. Apart from their clothes being compatible, they are a completely different person. I wonder if there are any interesting things thrown in from the outside world at the Bori Shrine. Misty Rain Devil Lisa's face is full of expectations as she giggles. If there is, I will borrow it to play with Lingming. The borrow is the witch's, the wish. It means that although it is a borrow in the hands of Misty Rain Devil Lisa, the thing she borrows will never be returned. Not only that, Misty Rain Devil Lisa's borrow is completely different from other people's. Her borrow means that she doesn't need the owner's permission to take away the thing she wants. In other words, she is stealing. Very simple, understand? Thus, Misty Rain Devil Lisa, who is known as a mage, but is actually a black and white bandit, arrived at the Bori Shrine with the help of her own magic tools. She descended in front of the Bori Shrine's entrance. Lingming, after shouting loudly, Misty Rain Devil Lisa didn't have the intention to knock on the door and directly opened it. I came to see you. Misty Rain Devil Lisa's voice became weaker and weaker. Her expression also changed rapidly. In the end, it turned into an extremely shocked expression. Marissa? Inside the shrine, Bori Lingming's panicked and shocked voice rang out. However, Bori Lingming's voice came from the ground. In Misty Rain Devil Lisa's eyes, Bori Lingming's body was drenched as she sat on the ground. No, more accurately, it should be said that Bori Lingming was completely drenched, her fair skin exposed to the air through her red and white robe, appearing extremely alluring. Currently, she was sitting on top of a man lying on the ground, a man that Misty Rain Devil Lisa had never seen before. He raised his head and looked at her with a dazed expression. That's right, she's sitting on a man lying on the ground, a woman on top and a man on the bottom. A perfect example of a woman on top and a man on the bottom. It is because of this that Misty Rain Devil Lisa, who doesn't care about details, was so shocked that she couldn't react for a long time. Misty Rain Devil Lisa and Bori Lingming are good friends. At least, that is what Misty Rain Devil Lisa thinks. Indeed, in the fantasy village, other than Yukari, the one who dares to say that she knows Bori Lingming the best is definitely Misty Rain Devil Lisa. In Misty Rain Devil Lisa's understanding, Bori Lingming is someone who is not interested in anything. She is not even interested in the things that her identity as a Bori shrine which should do. She is a lazy person who is only interested in money. Such a person was now sitting on a man's body in a position where the woman was on top and the man was below. What would Misty Rain Devil Lisa think? She would think, LOLing. With a trembling finger, Misty Rain Devil Lisa pointed at Bori Lingming and shouted in shock. You finally found your duty as a woman. Do you plan to follow the steps of an adult and continue the Bori Shrine's legacy? Just as Misty Rain Devil Lisa's voice fell, a pop sound came from Bori Lingming's head. It seems like something broke. Veins popped out on her forehead. Bori Lingming didn't even think and directly shouted at Misty Rain Devil Lisa. Who would want to do something as troublesome as giving birth to a child? Hearing this, Wu Yin, who was being pressed down by Bori Lingming, couldn't help but ridicule. So you already know that you are someone who can't do something as important as giving birth to a child? What did you say? Bori Lingming was furious. She raised her fist and punched towards Wu Yan's chest. You are the one who can't do something as important as giving birth to a child. I really can't do that. Wu Yan quickly got up and shouted as if he couldn't take it anymore. Say, can you hit me with less force? Can you get up first? Hearing this, Bori Lingming remembered that not only was she in close contact with the man under her, she was also twisting around on top of him. She was being taken advantage of. Bori Lingming jumped up as if she was electrocuted. She pulled away from Wu Yan and shouted at Wu Yan. I'm sure now. You're the one who caused my broom to break 11 times this morning. You are the one who will bring me misfortune. Don't talk nonsense. Wu Yan got up from the ground and patted the dust off his body. He curled his lips and pointed at Misty Rain Devil Lisa. The only one who will bring misfortune is that black and white. You're that black and white. Your whole family is that black and white. Misty Rain Devil Lisa was furious. However, she quickly asked with a face full of curiosity. Say, you actually have the ability to make Lingming push you down. Who exactly are you? Devil, Li, Sha. Bori Lingming couldn't help but take out her own imperial coin. It was a wooden stick with 2 long strips of paper wrapped around its tip. She angrily pointed it at Misty Rain Devil Lisa. Do you want me to treat you? I am not a devil nor a spirit. Why would you treat me? Misty Rain Devil Lisa was dissatisfied. However, she licked her lips in the next second. However, if you want to fight with me, I am more than happy to. You stop. Yes, me. Tell me where Scarlet Devil Mansion is. Let go of me. Bori Lingming struggled. Scarlet Devil Mansion? Misty Rain Devil Lisa looked at Wu Yan in confusion. You want to go to Scarlet Devil Mansion? I don't have time to talk to you. Wu Yan looked at Misty Rain Devil Lisa impatiently. Just tell me where Scarlet Devil Mansion is. Misty Rain Devil Lisa was startled. She stretched out her hand and pointed in a direction. Okay. Following this voice, the three figures in the shrine disappeared without a trace. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.